Can you start the recording?
Yeah.
Perfect. Welcome, everyone. It is February 2nd, 2022, 6:01 p.m. So I hereby open the regular session of the Planning Commission. Could we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Commissioner McGinley,
Present.
Commissioner Landon, Commissioner Koivula,
Here.
Commissioner Gill,
Present.
Commissioner Bergen,
Here.
Commissioner Salzar,
Present.
and Commissioner Buck called and he'll be late. And that's roll call.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So I will just ask that all of the other commissioners remain muted.
Oh, this is weird. I have something different on my screen for sharing. That's really weird. I cannot get this to share. Sandy, do you have one that you can share? My computer won't share it.
I do not have a flag, so let's just imagine a flag and say the pledge.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Do we have do we have any? Oops, I'm in the wrong spot in my script. I would like to ask members of the audience who are joining us by phone or online to please keep yourselves on mute until you are called to provide public testimony. There are 2 times to present public testimony tonight. First, we will have business from the audience, which is a time for anyone to speak to the Planning Commission on any subject that is not the zoning map amendment from Catholic Community Services on the agenda tonight. There will be a separate time for the public hearing tonight on the zoning map amendment, and that should be around 7 p.m. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
I received none.
Great, thank you. So now is the time for business from the audience. As a reminder, this is the time to speak on any topic that is not the application on the agenda tonight. If you are joining us online and wish to speak, please use the chat window. Please send a comment to the host with your name, mailing address, and the subject you would like to speak about. You can select the host only at the bottom of the chat window. Please do not use the chat feature for any other purpose during the meeting. I will call on you when it is your turn to speak. For people calling in by phone, we will announce a time for those on the phone to speak. If you do not wish to speak, just state that you do not want to speak. Is there anyone who chatted that they would like to speak, Brenda?
No one has asked.
Okay, great. And I'm not seeing anyone on the phone. Okay, so with that, I will call the agenda item of the Development Code Update Project with staff Mark Rust. Tonight, the Springfield Planning Commission is deliberating on the city-initiated amendments to the Springfield Development Code affecting residential and employment lands in Springfield. A joint public hearing with Lane County Planning Commission was held on January 4th, 2022, and the record was left open for additional public comments through January 18th, 2022. Any comments submitted after 10 a.m. on January 18th will be provided to the City Council and the Lane County Board of Commissioners for their public hearing later in the spring. The purpose of tonight's meeting is for the Springfield Planning Commission to complete deliberations regarding whether to approve with modifications, or not approve the Development Code updates. Before we begin our deliberations, we will need to declare any conflicts of interest. So I will hand it over to Christina to inform us about those.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioners may only have a potential conflict of interest regarding the code update project because the Commission's future recommendation to the City Council and Lane County Board of Commissioners isn't binding. Commissioners with potential conflicts of interest must disclose the nature of the conflict and then can participate in the work session. One example of a potential conflict of interest related to the Development Code update project is owning residential or commercial land in Springfield because property values may be affected by the proposed code changes.
Thank you, Christina. So I'll call on each of the commissioners to disclose any potential conflicts of interest. So I'll start with myself, Commissioner McGinley. I do not own property, so I have no potential conflicts of interest. Commissioner Cuevila.
Yes, I own property in Springfield, so I have a potential conflict of interest.
Thank you. Commissioner Salazar.
Yes, I have two potential conflicts of interest. One that I own residential property in Springfield, and the other is that I work for a real estate developer that operates in Springfield.
Thank you. Commissioner Gill.
I own property in Springfield, so have a potential conflict of interest.
Thank you. Commissioner Bergen.
We have two potential conflicts of interest, a property owner in Springfield and a practicing real estate broker.
Thank you. And I'll note for the minutes that Vice Chair Landon is present. Commissioner Landon, are you ready to provide a potential conflict of interest for the Development Code Update project?
I am. I have a potential conflict of interest because I own property in Springfield.
All right, thank you, everyone. So before I hand it over to Mark, I'll just note that if our deliberations are needed to continue past 7 p.m., we can make a motion to put those on pause while we go forth with the 7 p.m. public hearing. And then we can return to them afterwards. So just letting you know, we don't have to wrap it up in the hour. And I have more information about that when we get there. So over to you, Mark.
Great. Thank you, Chair McGinley, and good evening, commissioners. Thank you for having me tonight. And I am Mark Rust with the City of Springfield. We are here to talk about the Springfield Development Code Update. I'll just go through a couple slides here. I guess I better share my screen first. That would probably help. Let's see. Are people seeing that introductory screen? Great, thank you. So as you've seen a number of these slides at the beginning here, I do like to just go through them each time for members of the public or anybody watching this later. The Springfield Development Code Update project, we've been going on for about a little over 3.5 years. At the beginning of the project, the community engagement plan was approved by the Planning Commission, acting in their capacity as the Committee for Citizen Involvement with input from the City Council. This was the purpose statement approved as part of that community engagement plan for the project. And in addition to the purpose statement, the objectives for the project were also part of that community engagement plan. I'm not going to read through these, but we've gone over them before, but there they are. Just to highlight again the approval criteria for the proposed code changes that are considered for the actual legal findings to justify the code changes. This is the list of those approval criteria that we laid out at the outset of the public hearing. And then to quickly revisit the timeline of the project, we're here now in the first quarter of 2022. We're concurrently processing phase 1 of the project, which is represented by these yellow bars, is the housing phase, and also phase 2 represented by these orange bars, which is the employment lands phase. So the step task 8 and task 12 represent this adoption process, which we're in now as part of the Planning Commission public hearing. And I'll just note too that I won't see everybody's screens. So if there are questions along the way, I'm going to try and keep this pretty short and allow the commission to deliberate tonight, but I do want to go over a few things. But if there's questions, feel free to chime in or raise hands or let me know if there's questions. So just to recap very briefly, we did last hold a joint deliberations meeting with the Lane County Planning Commission, as you'll recall, on January 18th with this the Springfield Planning Commission as well. As part of those deliberations, a few topics were discussed and a straw poll was taken. And these were the 3 topics that the straw poll was taken on, that we have incorporated the changes as a result of these three topics and those straw polls into the drafts that are before you tonight. So those are kind of three topics that we're considering at least tentatively resolved and incorporated into the proposed code drafts that are part of the packet for tonight. Topics that we have laid out in the memo for tonight, for at least 5 topics that we see as that we're asking the commission to discuss or deliberate on, or that we heard comments on that we felt needed to be addressed in some capacity, is this list of 5 topics. So these are the 5 we're hoping to get through tonight. And then any others that may come up, but we're starting with lot size, and I'll provide a little bit more detail on those specific to triplex and fourplex lot sizes for middle housing. And then parking. There is some relation between lot size and parking that I'll mention here in a minute, that I'll talk about, that's not necessarily mentioned in the memo. So there's some additional detail I want to share on that. And then some conversation about demolition of existing structures, access to green space, and then home ownership versus rental, or incentivizing home ownership opportunities. So ultimately, our recommendation for the Planning Commission tonight, as it's laid out in the memo in the packet, is for the Planning Commission to ultimately adopt a final order and a recommendation that is included as attachment 2. And then also we've provided opportunity as attachment 5 if the Planning Commission wishes to adopt a supplemental recommendation addressing other topics that are outside the scope of the Development Code Update project. There's opportunity to include that as well. So with that, I'm going to jump into just a few slides to frame the topic of the lot size discussion, unless there's any questions right now before I jump into that. And again, I'm not seeing hands necessarily of everybody. So if there are, I'm not hearing any. So I'll just go through a couple slides on the lot size. As it's laid out in your memo for tonight in consideration, the middle housing rules from the state for triplexes and fourplexes require us to at least allow triplexes on 5,000 square foot lots and fourplexes on 7,000 square foot lots. There is the opportunity or flexibility for the city to consider allowing triplexes and fourplexes on lots lower than those, smaller than those. You'll recall, as part of the community survey, the results from the community survey did pretty clearly indicate a preference for allowing smaller lot sizes. There's some options laid out in the memo, and there's potentially some tweaking of those options based on this relationship to parking. It was actually Chair McGinley that highlighted or reminded us of the specific rule language from the state for middle housing. And if the commission decides to recommend lower lot sizes, there is a relationship to parking that's required to be considered as part of that I'll get to here in just a second. We have provided a map that highlights all the zoning and the by lot size category. And I'll show that map here in just a minute. There is a significant number of lots within the city within those size categories that we're talking about, the 5,000 and 7,000 square foot lot sizes in certain zoning districts. Primarily, we're focusing on the existing LDR, the low density residential land use district, or what we're proposing to change the name of that land use district to the R1 zone. There is also included in the packet tonight, attachment 3 is a middle housing economic feasibility study that was conducted pretty early on in the rulemaking process at the state level. This economic study was for the Rules Advisory Committee to help formulate that 5,000 and 7,000 square foot lot size number. I will point out that economic study is fairly limited, or some things have evolved since that economic study was done. One thing in particular is that study only contemplated what I'll call greenfield development or new development. It did not consider implications from infill development or adding units to lots that already had some level of development on it. The other thing that was not in place at the time that economic feasibility study was done is the middle housing land division laws that are now in place. So Senate Bill 458 was not even on the table at that point. So it didn't contemplate the ownership opportunities involved with Senate Bill 458 now, which will allow land division of new middle housing. Here's the map I referred to. It's a little blurry. It's not intended to be really specific, but just give kind of an overall view of citywide how much of the land is actually represented by lots in these different size categories. So you'll see what's highlighted in a green color, which isn't, there's quite a bit of spread out over the city. That green represents lot sizes between 5,000 and 7,000 square feet that under the current draft proposal, those would allow the triplexes. And then all of the orange lots represent lots that are over 7,000 square feet that would, under the current draft, allow fourplexes. So you can see that it's a pretty widespread amount of lots that represent. Now, again, all of these lots aren't all vacant. A lot of them are already developed. In fact, I would say the vast majority are already developed. I do have kind of a zoom in of the table. It turned out a little blurry.
Mark,
but yeah.
I apologize for interjecting. Commissioner Cuevila has his hand up.
Sure, that's fine. Thank you, Commissioner Cuevila.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Yeah, I wanted to just note that in the table you're bringing up that the 5,000 to 7,000 square foot accounts for less than 14% of lots in the be the R1 zone.
Great. Yeah, that's this number here, 13.5% by acreage. It looks like by number of tax lots, it's the 28.4% number in terms of number of tax lots. So great point. Thank you. And then this is kind of the new information that didn't really get captured in the memo for tonight. And again, in one of the early drafts prior to the public hearing, we had included some of this information about the state rules based on lot size for specifically triplexes and fourplexes, that there's a correlation in the rules that if we choose to go below the 5,000 and 7,000 square foot lot sizes, that we have to have a corresponding reduction in the parking requirement. So I've tried to very briefly put those in a couple of slides, how that looks for triplexes. So this first bullet is what we have in the draft today. We're proposing 5,000, and the minimum what we at least have to allow under the state rules is allow triplexes on at least 5,000 square foot lots. And with that, the most parking we can require is the 3 spaces. And that's kind of status quo, what the public hearing was held on and what's in the draft currently. If there's a decision to, by this body at least, recommend approval of lower lot sizes for triplexes, we have to correspondingly lower the parking space requirement as well. So if we lower it from 5,000 between 3,000 and 5,000, then the most parking we can require is 2 spaces. And if we allow a triplex on less than 3,000 square feet, the most parking we can require is 1 space. And similarly then with fourplexes, the status quo, this first bullet of what's in the draft today, is allowing fourplexes on 7,000 square foot lots. We can't require more than 4 parking spaces total for that fourplex. If the decision or choice is made to allow fourplexes on smaller lots between 5,000 and 7,000, the most parking we can require is 3. And then you can kind of see this tiers down between 5,000 and 3,000. The most parking we can require is 2 spaces. And then less than 3,000 square feet, the most parking we can require is 1 space. And that's 1 space total for the entire fourplex. So anyway, just so you understand that there's some implications from deciding to lower the lot sizes on parking. We've laid them out in the memo kind of as separate topics, but there is a connection there. So with that, that's all I have to say about lot sizes. I have some additional slides on parking and the other 3 topics, but I'll stop for now and turn it back over to the Planning Commission.
Great. Thank you, Mark. That's good timing because I had a question. So if we do decide to lower lot sizes, could that same language, the DLCD language, or sorry, I guess it would be the state's language, be put into the code as well? So could we require 4 parking spaces total if the lot is 7,000 square feet or greater, and then reduce it after that?
So let me try and make sure I'm understanding your question. Are you asking if we provide an option in some cases, or just that if we choose the lower lot size that we will put the language in the code for the parking?
My question is if the parking requirements would correlate with lot sizes if it's codified that way. So if we decide to reduce lot sizes, and somebody builds a 5,000 square foot or a fourplex on a 5,000 square foot lot, they would only have to build 3 on-site parking spaces. But if they build a fourplex on a 7,000 square foot lot or larger, we could still allow them to build, or we could still require them to build 4 on-site parking spaces. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, and maybe Christina wants to weigh in here. My take, at least initially, was if we choose to allow, can go with the fourplex example. If we choose to allow fourplexes on, say, down to a 5,000 square foot lot, the most parking we could require is 3 spaces. Even if somebody chooses to build a fourplex on, say, over 7,000. Go ahead, Christina.
That's the way the rule is written, is that we can only require 2 spaces in total for lots or parcels greater than or equal to 3,000 square feet and less than 5,000 square feet. So the commission could decide, I think, whether to copy those. If you're going to allow fourplexes on lots smaller than 5,000 square feet, then you could choose either one of those. I think you could choose either to have a graduated parking requirement based on lot size, or you could choose to have one parking requirement that was lower for all lots. The drafts to date have only allowed them on the smaller lot sizes where or the larger lots in the rules where it's matching those parking requirements. But you could take either approach and we could write that in.
So, and just to repeat, make sure I'm understanding correctly, you think your input is that we could have a graduated parking based on a graduated lot size?
As long as those parking requirements are not more than the state rules allow for that lot size, then yes, for those lots or parcels, we could have a graduated requirement.
And if I could share, I saw Elizabeth Decker is on, she's our consultant on this project. And Elizabeth, I don't know if you wanted to chime in on any of that. Elizabeth has a great statewide perspective on working with a number of jurisdictions around the state on this. So Elizabeth, did you want to offer anything on that?
I completely agree with Christina.
Right.
I was just going to chime in and offer that also, that's the way that that it's lot, the city has the option to make the parking lot dependent. And so it's just whatever your lot size is, you match up to that table is the maximum that can be required. Now, potentially for simplicity, the city would rather just have a single lot, parking requirement for a triplex or quadplex, but certainly there's feasibility issues on those smaller lots of trying to fit all that parking in. So it makes sense that that's where the graduated requirements at the state level come from.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Are there any other questions about Mark's presentation before we dive into deliberations? Okay, so I was just going to go down through the order of the topics in the memo. And then after, if there's something else that comes up that's not included in the memo, we can discuss that. So the first item in the memo is the question, what minimum lot size should be required for triplexes and fourplexes in the low density residential, but soon to be R1 district? Option 1 is to allow only what the state middle housing rules require. So that would be 5,000 square foot minimum lot size for triplex and 7,000 square foot minimum lot size for fourplex. Option 2 is to have both of them be at a 5,000 square foot minimum lot size. Option 3 is to have triplex be at 4,500 square feet and fourplex be at 6,000 square feet. And option 4 is match their minimum lot size to the minimum lot size being proposed for single detached dwellings, which is 3,000 square feet. It's a bit of a tongue twister. So I guess I would like to hear from each of the commissioners if you have a strong preference for the options. So I'm not seeing any hands, so I could just call on you. If you don't have a strong preference, you can just say that. If you want to hear what the other commissioners have to say before you indicate your preference, that's okay. This isn't, I'm just trying to get a feel for where the commission is. Do we have any volunteers before I call on people?
Just really quickly, can you share with us what attachment you were reading from? I'm trying
sorry.
to funnel through all the attachments and I just.
This is attachment 1 and it's page, oh shoot, I don't see the page numbers, page 2.
Thank you.
Christina, I see you have your hand up.
I have the options on slides and I'm happy to share those slides with the commission if that would be helpful.
That would be lovely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Christina. We can see that. And Commissioner Cuevla, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Yes, I think that I just as soon stay with the state standards. If I'm looking at some of the sizes of the lots for instance, we're allowed to go way down to some of the lower sizes. We're looking at like 27 by 27 or 750 square feet for a quadplex. Triplex would be 31 by 31 feet for a lot. That would be what you'd have to fit your quad thing in. Being that we're doing the expedited land division later and that there are other state rules coming down, I think it would be wisest at the present time to stay with the state minimum standards. And if we decide in the future, we can always go lower in the future. But for right now, my recommendation is to stay with the state minimum.
Thank you, Commissioner Cuevla. Okay, Commissioner Bergen.
Thank you. Just real quickly, I tend to agree with Commissioner Cuevla that option 1, which is the state, is that correct? We're looking at option 1, Commissioner Cuevla, but that seems to make the most sense because we can always go back later when more rules do come down. And I think that is, if I remember correctly, back on the community outreach, that seemed to be a good, comfortable place for a lot of the people that responded to the poll.
Just a point of clarification, Mark. Am I correct in recalling that I think it was 59% of the survey respondents wanted us to go lower than the maximum minimum?
That's correct. That is correct. 59%, and of that 59%, 37% said no minimum.
Thank you. And that sample size was roughly 80
80 participants of the survey, correct?
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. I'm so sorry to call on people. Commissioner Salazar.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I understand the reasonings of Commissioners Cuevila and Bergen. I know that we've discussed in the past, I'm forgetting, Mark, the name of the measure specifically, but we've talked in the past about the implications of the state measure, that it's a little easy, that as Commissioner Cuevila mentioned, it's easier to move to smaller lot sizes in the future than it would be to move backward to larger lot sizes in the future. Thank you, Mark. And that's House Bill 2003. Yeah, but there was a specific measure, I forget if it was a measure that has implications on allowable uses, measure 49. Thank you. So as I've mentioned in the past, I'm all for giving maximum developers maximum ability to be creative with lot sizes. And I think we do need to push towards more density. I would love us to move towards that maximum density option of 3,000 square foot minimum lot sizes. But I don't know if we're there yet. And I think, to me, option 2 of the 5,000 square foot minimum lot sizes could be a good middle ground. Understanding that it is easiest, as Commissioner Cuevila mentioned, that we can start with those maximum state requirements in option 1, and then kind of move towards more density in the future as new laws come down from the state. So I think my heart says option 4, but I would push for option 2, and I also would not be opposed to option 1 as well. This is where I land.
Thank you, Commissioner Salazar. And just a reminder for everyone to please refrain from using the chat. I know it can be awkward when we're fact checking, but even staff, please just interject and get your voice out there, since we try to not use the chat. Commissioner Gill.
Thank you. I lean toward option 1 right now because I feel very strongly that we should recommend to the City Council to look into the options related to ownership and keeping people in housing and affordable and workforce housing and all of those issues and some of the other ones that were on the list provided for us. And I think that approving option 1 now is for everybody, and potentially those higher density options could be connected to incentive opportunities. And so I would like to leave some room in this for possibility of incentives and that flexibility for laws coming down as they come down. But really, I feel strongly about some of the issues that we've been talking about that aren't in this because, frankly, staff was not directed to do anything like that, but the world has changed and these housing laws have come down. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Landon, do you have a strong preference?
I'm going to agree that I favor option 1. I'll confess I worry over the long term. Maybe I'm just alone on this, about over urbanizing, about making everything small. But aside from, I guess that's just the way the world is going. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. I can share my preference. I think I align with Commissioner Salazar, and I think I am having deja vu because we've had a bit of this conversation before. As the only renter on the commission, having the ability to have the smaller unit, potentially purchase a smaller unit that comes with less land costs because of smaller parcels, is something that I would really like to see in the future. So, less, in theory, smaller lots cost less, and smaller units cost less. And the last time we were having this conversation, I said that because so many of our existing lots are above that 5,000 square foot thresholds, I could be amenable to supporting option one. And I think it's important to support the majority of the commission, which is, I'm seeing you all are sitting mostly at option one. So so far, I have most of us at option one. If there's further discussion about option two, which Commissioner Salazar brought up, having both the triplex and fourplex at 5,000 square feet, I think we could discuss that. Is there any further discussion there? Any strong preference towards keeping fourplexes at 7,000 square feet? Commissioner Salazar.
Thank you, Chair. I guess as just a way to be a booster for option two, my argument would be is that we've heard from developers who are developing these kind of developments, and this is what they're asking for, is they're asking for smaller lot sizes and the ability to be creative and flexible with the space that they have. I think we need to encourage density and move towards that. So that would be my argument for option two, is that we've heard from the developers and this is what they're saying would help them to build smaller, more affordable units that would be more affordable for more of our citizens.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gill.
The other point about option two is that it does continue the simplification of the code, which was the direction of the city council and part of the point of why we're doing this work. So if you don't have to, if it can be the same for some, that might be easier and clearer. And it also does allow for some of that possibility for using the lot size as an incentive for the kinds of housing we're looking for.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mark, did you have a response to that?
I just wanted to respond, if I could, share to Commissioner Quavula's comment in the chat. And my apologies for starting the line of chat, but his question about we cannot move to lesser lot sizes if we allow smaller now. And I think my response, it relates to what Commissioner Gill and Salazar were just talking about in terms of option two, going a little bit lower, at least for the fourplex. I think there still could be further reductions later down the road, say with the House Bill 2003 work, and it may be just in certain areas, but I think there's still room to go down, even if the commission decided to say choose option two now. That was going to be my input. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Quavula, and then I'll throw myself in the queue.
Yeah, again, looking at the math for 5,000 square feet for a fourplex would be a 35 by 35 foot footprint for the quarter of the lot. So I myself consider that if you put a 35 by 35 and you have to have the 10-foot setback on one side and the 5-foot setback on the other side, you're really, I mean, it's basically a postage stamp. I don't really think very many folks will be building those anyway. And maybe they can be incentivized again through providing affordability or something like that. But I just don't think they're going to be built. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think I'd like to put in my support for option two. And I'll explain my rationale. I think with reducing the lot size and reducing the requirement of one on-site parking spot. There could be added flexibility. I think it would result in smaller units within the fourplex, which then hopefully would be lower cost. And then I also like the idea of having, I guess, 2 steps in the code for lot size. So for single detached dwellings and duplexes, since they have to be on the same lot size, those are both proposed to be at 3,000 square feet. And then that next step up could be triplexes and fourplexes at 5,000 square feet. I think that simplifies the code. And then I think that reduction of the parking spot would make it more feasible. And again, I think I've mentioned this before, just by not requiring on-site parking doesn't mean that it won't be built. So there still could be 4 parking spots if the developer so chose. But yeah, I think I'm going to stop there and just say that I'm amenable to, I'm like to support option 2. And then I have from there a bit of a split commission on this. So I would just like to hear further discussion. And Mark, I see your hand is raised.
If I could just interject one more thing, Chair, and that is we had some discussion, and Elizabeth Decker may potentially chime in at this point as well. And as a comparison, the townhome provisions envision 1,000 square foot lot sizes for each unit. And so you could have a series of townhomes, each unit on a 1,000 square foot lot size. So again, because Senate Bill 458, the middle housing land division regulations weren't in play when the rules for all the middle housing was written, the dynamic has shifted a little bit. And now that, say, these 4 units could be built essentially just like townhomes, like for a fourplex, and then ultimately divided, there's almost this gray area now between, well, is it a fourplex or is it 4 attached potentially townhomes? There's almost the dividing lines between the different middle housing types become a little bit more blurred. So just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Mark. Commissioner Bergen.
Thank you. I still will speak in favor of option 1. If it is my understanding, and I'm hoping, Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that if number 2 seems to be if this, then that. If we chose 2, then we would automatically reduce our parking minimum or maximum requirement. Minimum requirement. I know we just talked about it this evening, and I'm looking over at the chart over here. I think that, it's important for us to have that conversation about the parking. I have different opinions on reducing parking. So I think that option 1 allows us the freedom to choose that. Whereas if we went with option 2, we would have to adjust the parking regardless. Mark, is that correct?
It would be you're correct in that if you chose option 2, we would have to allow for the fourplexes. The most parking we could require would be 3 spaces rather than 4.
Or those ones that are more than 5,000 and less than 7,000. You could have the option to require 4 parking spaces for those lots that are 7,000 square feet and above.
Correct.
Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, and it's not ideal to have kind of a split opinion here. So is there any other discussion on this, or should we perhaps move forward and revisit it? Commissioner Cuevila.
Option 1.
Thank you. Commissioner Salazar.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I would recommend, I think since likely our discussion on parking will have implications on this discussion, that we move along and then circle back to this and see where that leads us.
Great, thank you. I'm seeing some head nods and we're already at 6:45. So Yes, let's move forward to parking and come back to this. Okay, so here the options are to require the most, I guess, the largest minimum that we can for our required on-site parking, or require less. So I think I've already heard from Commissioner Bergen about parking. Are there any other commissioners who have strong preferences here with required on-site parking? Commissioner Quivola, I see you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, require a state minimum number. So match what the state tells us.
Thank you. Commissioner Gill.
Again, I really want incentives to happen, and this is an area where those could be applied, especially in certain areas where we are closer, where construction or development might be closer to mass transit opportunities or other options. So I lean toward the basic state requirements, with the caveat that I really want incentives for, I really want the community, I really want the city council, I really want staff to be thinking about what we really want to see for housing in this community. And these are tools that we can use to incentivize what we want to see. And I don't think that those conversations have happened in a thorough way. And I think that these incentives are ones that the public engagement has brought up. And so again, I lean toward the space where we can have space to use this as an incentive option. I will say also, like, if those incentives don't happen, then I would lower the requirements. I think that despite what the public may want, people often have a inflated perception of the need for parking in all kinds of areas of the community. And I think we can address those things in a lot of ways. But for me, the possibility for incentive is a higher priority.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Salazar.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think definitely along the lines of what Commissioner Gill was saying. I think it's important, and when I think about it, I think about parking in terms of these conversations we've been having about incentives and incentivizing density, incentivizing less parking in certain areas that match the needs of those areas in the city. I think that especially it's hard to have this conversation without acknowledging that parking, I mean, I work as a developer and I know that parking is one of the biggest factors in driving the costs of land and the costs of development, is because if you're requiring land to be used for parking, that's land that you can't use for a dwelling unit that's very needed in our community. So I think I would personally, again, just like last time, I'm leaning towards option 2, but I wouldn't block option 1. I understand that, and I think with the caveat that I think I would be more amenable to option 1 if we were to add some additional recommendation to pass to the council around moving towards incentivizing less parking, incentivizing density, incentivizing development around green spaces. I think these are the conversations that we've started to have and we need to continue to have.
Thank you. Commissioner Landon.
Okay with the option 2.1. That one doesn't scare me so much.
Great, thank you. And throw my preference in. in general, I would like to see more space for housing, and less space required for parking, and let the market decide, because parking is usually a desirable market factor. And I agree that I think that it makes more sense to incentivize in certain places. I don't have on-site parking where I live because I live next to a really wonderful bike trail and the MX, so it doesn't make sense for me to rely on my car. So I would love to see option 2, and wouldn't really put up an argument against option 1. And just a reminder that further regulations from the state are coming down around parking requirements through the climate friendly and equitable cities rulemaking. So that's something that's going to be coming to the commission again, as soon as later this year, early next year. And we're going to have that conversation. So I say for now, I think we could just go with option 1 and let the other requirements come as they do. Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just really quick, you mentioned the forthcoming climate friendly and equitable community rules, and probably just a little bit further out is the House Bill 2003 work that will have to look at ways to produce housing. And some of that may revolve around incentivization of it in certain areas for sure. So definitely more work to be done on these topics.
Thank you. Commissioner Quibla.
Yeah, I just wanted to anecdotalize this and say, if we're looking at lack of parking or removing parking because of different reasons, that we can look at, say, the West Eugene, West University neighborhood. Now, students there have highly walkable neighborhoods. They are very close to transit. They are also very close to bike paths, grocery stores, etc. And most of the students are actually young and rather well physically fit. At the same time, you drive through those streets and they are absolutely jam-packed with cars because they're not requiring off-street parking. So I just want to make sure that we don't, if that is, I'm not sure that that's the type of living situation that we want to see in our neighborhoods in Springfield.
Thank you, Commissioner Quibla. So I'm hearing majority support for option 1 here. And just also to do a time check, it's 6:53. So if there's energy to revisit minimum lot size, we can also punt that to after our public hearing and take a break before the public hearing. Is there any preference there, Commissioner Bergen?
Thank you. If we are leaning towards option 1 on this one, then am I correct in deducting that we have to go with option 1 on the other one? Because if we went with option 2, then that would delineate our option here from option 1 down to option 2. Am I correct understanding that correctly?
I can chime in there, Chair and Commissioner. I believe you're correct in what you're saying. So, and Christina, correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe you just want to chime in, but yeah, if you're talking about requiring the most parking under the state rules, then it would, I guess, in some degree, limit your options under the lot size standards as well.
It would limit those options. It would not be option 2.2 because that was a half space per unit, which was some of the public comment you got. So it would reduce it down to essentially 0.67 spaces per dwelling unit for some fourplexes. So I have in my notes that you've elected option 2.1 with the caveat that if your decision under the first set of lot sizes is anything other than the 5,000 and 7,000, then we'll want to change this to add 2 lines for fourplexes so that you have 1 space per dwelling unit, 4 spaces total for those lots that are 7,000 square feet or larger. And then for the smaller class of lots, you would have 0.67 spaces per dwelling unit or 3 spaces total. So this would just become sort of option 2.1 asterisk if you elected different lot. It sounds like you're just deciding between, at this point, whether fourplexes should have a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet or 7,000 square feet. So that is still a pretty constrained issue. I can make edits to this in real time when you get there, probably after the public hearing.
Okay, I don't know that we can talk about lot size that briefly, so I'm going to propose that we table this, postpone it, and then take a brief break before the public hearing. So in order to do this, I would need someone to move to postpone the deliberations on the development code update until after the next agenda item, which is the zoning map amendment for Catholic Community Services. Commissioner Salazar.
I'd like to move that we postpone this discussion until after our next item, which is the zoning map amendment for Catholic Community Services.
I'll second.
Motion to postpone deliberations on the development code update project until after the next agenda item, made by Commissioner Salazar, seconded by Commissioner Gill. I'll do a roll call vote. So I'll start with myself. I support that. Commissioner Bergen.
Aye.
Commissioner Cuevila.
Yes.
Commissioner Landon.
Aye.
Commissioner Gill.
Aye.
Commissioner Salazar.
Aye.
Right. Motion passes unanimously. So let's take a 5-minute break. So it is 6:57 and we can reconvene at 7:02 for the public hearing. So stay tuned. It's the same Zoom. We'll just be right back. Okay, thank you for your patience for that break. So I will now call the next agenda item, which is the zoning map amendment for the Catholic Community Services. And I'll hand it over to Christina for the quasi-judicial statement of legal rights.
Thank you, Chair. The role of the Planning Commission is to conduct public hearings and to make decisions about land use matters in Springfield. In making those decisions, the Commission must apply the law of Springfield that existed when the application was filed and cannot vary from or change that law. Members of the Planning Commission are to be unbiased. Before the start of the hearing, members of the Planning Commission will state whether they have any conflicts of interest, such as family, financial, or business relationship with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question. If such a potential conflict exists, the commissioner will state whether he or she is without actual bias or whether he or she would like to step down from the Planning Commission during the case. Planning commissioners will also state whether they have discussed the application in question with any of the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question. If any planning commissioners have had such contacts, they will disclose the substance of that contact. If a planning commissioner has independent knowledge of relevant facts, the planning commissioner will summarize those facts. During the time for public testimony, a witness may challenge the impartiality of a planning commissioner and may rebut the substance of a planning commissioner's knowledge of the facts. The commissioner in question may respond to such a challenge. A copy of the procedures and agenda for today's hearing and copies of the staff report have been posted on springfieldoregonspeaks.org. Any person with an interest in today's agenda may offer relevant oral or written testimony or both. If you want the Planning Commission to consider your testimony and to preserve your right to appeal the decision to the City Council and ultimately to the Land Use Board of Appeals, you must testify orally or in writing before the Planning Commission closes the written record. You must raise an issue clearly enough so that people can understand what it is and offer evidence in support of it, or else you cannot raise that issue on appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals. If you are the applicant, you must raise concerns about any conditions of approval clearly enough to allow the Planning Commission to respond to preserve your right to seek damages in circuit court. If you feel you need more time to prepare evidence or testimony for the Planning Commission, you can ask the Commission to hold the record open or to continue the hearing. You must make that request before the chair closes the public portion of the hearing. If the Planning Commission holds open the record, you can submit additional written testimony and evidence into the record before the Commission makes a decision. If the Planning Commission continues the hearing, then oral and written testimony, including new evidence, can be offered at a future hearing. Regardless of whether the hearing is continued or the record is held open for any other reason, state law provides we must hold the record open for at least 7 days after it is closed to all other parties to allow the applicant to submit final written arguments in support of an application, unless the applicant waives that right. Please make sure your testimony is related to the applicable criteria. The criteria for the zoning map amendment are in Springfield Development Code section 5.22-115C. They're described in more detail in the staff report and are posted on springfieldoregonspeaks.org under this agenda item, and they will be summarized by staff in the presentation this evening. Demonstrations from the audience are prohibited. Comments from the audience or comments from the phone or online that are out of turn will not be part of the record. Those joining the meeting online who wish to testify may send a message to the host stating your name, mailing address, whether you support, oppose, or are neutral with regard to the application. During the public hearing, the host will ask those joining by telephone if they wish to testify, if we have anyone who is joining by telephone. Please begin your testimony by giving your name and mailing address. If you represent someone else, please say so. If you have any exhibits you want the Planning Commission to consider, such as a copy of testimony, photographs, petitions, or other documents or physical evidence that you've not already submitted, please email it to Andy Limbird at alimbird, ALIMBIRD at springfield-or.gov before the record is closed, and I will post that address in the chat. And then please indicate that you've done so during your oral testimony so that we know that it's there. Chair, it's now appropriate to open the public hearing and ask if any planning commissioner wishes to declare any potential conflict of interest, any ex parte contact, or independent knowledge of relevant facts.
Thank you, Christina. I now open the public hearing and I'll call on each of the commissioners. So I will start with myself. I have no conflicts of interest and no ex parte contacts. Vice Chair Landon.
I have no conflicts of interest and have had no ex parte contacts.
Commissioner Cuevila.
A little bit complicated. I'm actually the Planning Commission representative to the Community Development Advisory Committee. And as such, we looked at the application for community development funds from Catholic Community Services on this exact project. So I'd have to say that I have independent knowledge and probably, I wouldn't call it ex parte contact because it was all a matter of public record in the CDAC deliberations, but it does make it kind of complicated. So if Christina could weigh in on that, I'd appreciate that.
If there's information that you've learned from that experience that you feel is relevant to your decision-making, that you will factor into your decision-making, then it would be helpful to have you disclose that at some point before the applicant's final rebuttal, so that they can rebut the substance of those facts if they need to. Otherwise, if your decision is not going to be based on that information, then I think you can say so.
Okay, I'll bring that up. Thank you.
Commissioner Gill.
I have no conflicts of interest and no ex parte contact. I am, however, extremely familiar with the site. I've been in the building many times, and I walk by it almost every day, so I'm super familiar. It wasn't a specific site visit for this, but just want to say I've been there many times.
Commissioner Bergen.
Thank you. No ex parte contact, no conflicts of interest, and no independent knowledge. I too am very familiar with the area and used to many years ago live in the area.
And Commissioner Salazar.
Thank you, Chair. I have no conflicts of interest and no ex parte contacts. My only independent knowledge of the site is reserved to having driven by the site and walking by the site.
Thank you, everyone. I will now hand it over to Senior Planner Andy Limbird for the staff report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to bring up, if I can, I will attempt to start my slideshow here. And hopefully everyone can see my screen, which shows a map of Springfield and the location of the site. It's just north of downtown, the corner of 10th and G Street. And the subject property is outlined in yellow on the map on the screen. It's at the southeast corner of 10th and G Street. And it's a rectangular property just under 1 acre in size. And it has a mid-block alley that runs behind the site between F and G Street. To the north is the Bratton House, which is part of the school district's facilities, as well as the Two Rivers Dos Rios Elementary School across the street to the north. And it's just a little bit kitty corner from Springfield High School, which is just up 10th Street. So many people are familiar with the site. The current zoning for this property is low density residential, and that is consistent with the Metro Plan designation for this portion of Springfield. The neighborhood generally to the west, east, and south is also similarly zoned low density residential. Areas to the north, which are the school district properties, are zoned public land and open space, and they're associated with the various school facilities that are constructed on those properties. The applicant is proposing to rezone this property to neighborhood commercial. Neighborhood commercial is a very site-specific zoning that's allowable within non-commercially designated districts within Springfield. The Metro Plan does allow for these types of site-specific zonings to occur on a limited basis, and the applicant's pursuit of this rezoning is to essentially memorialize the type of activities that are occurring on the site already. For example, charitable services are a listed use in the neighborhood commercial district. They are not a listed use in the low density residential district. So the site currently is considered a non-conforming use within the neighborhood. The rezoning would bring the existing building and activities on the site into conformity with the zoning. And it would also facilitate future modifications or development on the site in accordance with provisions of the neighborhood commercial district. And I do have the criteria for zoning map amendments. Essentially, the consistency needs to be with the comprehensive plan and the applicable policies of the Metro Plan and the Metro Plan diagram. As I stated, the Metro Plan does consider that there are site-specific applications of neighborhood commercial and other types of zoning that can occur within other types of land use designation, and also consistency with the conceptual development plan and refinement plans for the city. This is not within a refinement plan area, but there are certain conceptual plans that are applicable to the site, and those have been stated in the staff report. The applicant did provide a transportation analysis that indicates that should the property be rezoned and subsequently be redeveloped with something other than what is occurring on the site. So not a charitable services use, but a typical commercial use such as a convenience store. It would not cause nearby roads and intersections to be overburdened with trips. Intersections would be able to accommodate the trips that would be generated by a more intensive development on the site should it be redeveloped under the neighborhood commercial zoning. The applicant is not intending to do that type of redevelopment on the site, but the zoning action needs to consider all types of use moving forward and how the site could potentially be redeveloped. And that does include other types of commercial uses that are listed in neighborhood commercial zoning district. It is located at the intersection of two collector streets. Both 10th and G streets are collector streets, and so they're able to handle larger volumes of traffic than some of the other neighborhood streets in the vicinity. And for example, the streets are used as the primary routes both for transit and also for schools, people to deliver kids to school, pick up kids from school, school buses, and that sort of thing. So they're designed and intended for the larger volumes of traffic. The applicant has provided a narrative that is cited in the staff report. Staff, it concurs with the findings that the applicant has provided that it does qualify for rezoning. And staff supports the recommendation for rezoning to neighborhood commercial to accommodate the use on the site. So I'd be happy to answer any specific questions if you have them. I do note in your packet, there were 2 letters of support that were included. After the packet was prepared, there were 2 comments, generally in opposition and expressing concerns about activities in the neighborhood associated with this site and possibly with prior activities on the site. They have been included in the comments that are on Springfield Oregon Speaks. And so I just wanted to direct the attention of commissioners to those comments as well. The testimony that was submitted separately and was moved into the comments section for this item as far as the testimony provided by some of the nearby residents and property owners in the area. So if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them here.
Commissioner Bergen, followed by Commissioner Gill.
Thank you. Just a quick chicken before the egg question here. Are you able to provide a little bit of history when you had mentioned that its current use right now is non-conforming? Do you know, and if memory serves correctly, this building was built in the 60s. Was the building built first or the zoning put in place first?
The building would have been in place first. My understanding is that the building was constructed as a church about 1965. That I'm basing it on the applicant's testimony and their project narrative. Catholic Community Service, it was as a church. The church use ceased on the site. Catholic Community Services acquired the site about 2004 and used it for administrative offices and other functions of the charitable services, social services for the church from 2004 to present. So the church use preceded the zoning application of low density residential, which would be associated with adoption of the Metro Plan in 1980 and kind of the current contemporary zoning of Springfield, which would be around 1985 or so. So the building precedes the zoning. The use changed after the zoning was implemented. It is considered an existing non-conforming use. It can remain as is, but in order to change or expand the use or modify the site, it would require either a rezoning or a non-conforming use, expansion of a non-conforming use, which is a similar public hearing process, potentially with a discretionary use permit. Churches are typically a discretionary use in low density residential zoning, but it is not a church. It's not a worship center. It's more of an administrative and I guess community support services building and activities on the site. So hopefully that explains a bit more about the history.
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Gill.
Thank you. So just taking that line of thought, because that was one of the questions I had one step further. There is an existing process then outside of this rezone that could work.
That's correct.
If they were to do expansion.
Yes, that is correct. It may be seen as more cumbersome. And it would not address the zoning issue. It would be an expansion of a non-conforming use, but it still would be a non-conforming use. And so I believe that the applicant's intention is to bring it into conformity to make it a conforming use and then look at expansions, modifications to the site. And I think that was what was desired, is to ensure that the activities are more consistent with what the zoning provides for, which is charitable services as in the neighborhood commercial site. So that was the preferred course of action by the applicant, and that would be the staff's recommended course as well. Either way, there would be a public hearing. Either way, there would be a land use action, and this was their preferred option moving forward to make things down the road operate more smoothly for the land use actions.
Okay, thanks. And related to what you just brought up, the this charitable service aspect as a commercial use. Could you talk about that a little bit? How that falls under commercial?
I guess it would be associated with something that would be more intensive than what, like a home occupation or an incidental commercial use you might find in a residential district. Some, types of, there's a limited number of commercially associated uses that would be allowable. Medical offices as an example, but it's typically very small scale. It doesn't generate traffic. It's innocuous. The buildings are residential in nature. And in this case, this is a more obvious commercial use. The building's over 15,000 square feet. It has a parking lot. It's not on-street parking. It doesn't have a residential style driveway. So the movement to a commercial zoning better reflects the sort of the magnitude of the development, the size and scale of development on the site. It's an acre. Most of the lots in the area are probably a fraction of an acre. And they're, have single detached dwelling, maybe an accessory dwelling unit or something. So it also serves as a transition between residential areas, this site, and then the school, which is its own entity. It has its own kind of activity focus and traffic patterns, and it has a neighborhood, if not community focus as well, not in a commercial sense, but more in a community activity sense. So I think that the commercial zoning, because it's allowable, it's an allowable use in that district. It can be achieved without having to go through a comprehensive plan amendment. That was the step that the applicant took, and certainly is understandable as to why they selected that path.
Thanks, that's really helpful.
Okay.
Commissioner Cuevila.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is going to go ahead and discuss some of the items I learned when I was working on the CDAC. When the application took place for the expansion during the CDAC, I do not remember hearing that this was a non-conforming use when the application for funding came through. Is the knowledge of the non-conforming use something that has come up since then? Or and this may be a question for the applicant, or was it something that just was never brought up during CDAC? So, thank you.
I think I'd have to defer to the applicant, and they may be able to provide that in their testimony or presentation. I was not party to the CDAC information, so I'm not sure what was related and how that was presented to various commissioners.
Great, thank you.
Are there any further questions for Andy before we move on to the applicant's presentation? Okay, with that, I will hand it over to the applicant for their presentation.
Hi, good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Teresa Bishop, and I'm here to kick off the presentation on behalf of the applicant. And there are additional members with the Catholic Community Services of Lane County who will probably want to speak tonight. First, I'd like to thank the city staff for their assistance in helping us navigate through to this point, and for the positive staff recommendation of approval. As you've heard, the Catholic Community Services purchased the property in 2004 and have really successfully operated and built strong partnerships and relationships with, for example, the Springfield School District and other social service agencies in the area. And when, in response to your question about when the non-conforming use concern arose, it's my understanding that when the City Council approved funding to allow the Oasis program to be located on the site and a building expansion, it wasn't identified as a barrier or hindrance, the zoning. And the applicant actually submitted for site plan review, an application with a site plan, building elevations, thinking that that would be the step towards being able to commence construction. And then we hit the concern about the non-conforming use. And frankly, this is the right path to take. I strongly support the applicant's efforts to bring the zoning in alignment with the commercial type uses that are occurring on the site. When you have a non-conforming use, you make lenders nervous, you make insurance companies nervous. It's just that a better course of action to be awarding federal funding to a project that is in compliance with local zoning. So the more we talked about it, the more we realized now is the time. It hasn't come up before since 2004, but now's the time to do it before further investing the significant funds to enhance and expand the programs. So in looking at the property you've heard this evening and you've seen in the staff report, we do believe the application is consistent with the Metro Plan and applicable functional plans. We do think it's an ideal site for the Oasis program and the charitable services that are currently being offered. And it was encouraging to see such strong positive letters of support that came in. And I think with that, I will conclude the introduction and allow other members to speak. Unless you have any questions, thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm not seeing anybody else come off of mute. So I think with that, we can move into our testimony. Oops, sorry. Jonathan, are you with the applicant?
Oh, no, I'm not. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Should I
sorry.
go?
Your opportunity will come really soon, I promise. Chris, are you with the applicant?
I am. I'm Chris Pickering. I'm speaking on behalf of Catholic Community Services. I'm the operations director. And my mailing address is 1025 G Street in Springfield, 97477. Did you want me to put that in the window? Is that where I'm supposed to put that?
So are you providing testimony or are you a part of this, the applicant presentation?
Yes, applicant presentation.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so your mailing address is not necessary.
Okay. I just wanted to make myself available if anybody had any questions to ask and to kind of explain how all of this came about. Teresa kind of did that a little bit, but as she was saying, we wanted to move one of our existing programs, and that's our Oasis program, which is a drop-in day center for homeless families. And that program has been housed at the First Baptist Church across our parking lot. And we wanted to bring it a little closer and right next to our existing building at 1025 G Street. And in the process of doing that, we applied for some CDBG funding and we received that funding. And so we hired an architect, to work on that. And in the process is when we found out that we were not zoned correctly. So that's how that non-conforming, all of that we found out. We are not going to be changing any of the services that we're providing to our clients. Everything is going to be just the same as what we're doing. Now we're going to be we're going to be zoned correctly. We didn't realize we were not zoned correctly. So that this is all about. So.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands from the commissioner. So now we can move forward into testimony, and then there will be an opportunity for applicant rebuttal and questions from the commission to staff and the applicant or persons who have testified. Before that, we have testimony. So as a reminder, if you would like to provide public testimony, please send a message to the host in the chat. stating your name and your mailing address and whether you are in favor of, opposed to, or neutral. I will call participants in order. First will be in favor, second will be neither in favor nor opposed, so neutral, and third will be opposed to the application. When you testify, please state your name and mailing address, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. I'll keep a little timer on my phone and flash my hands when you have about 30 seconds left. So Brenda, do we have any folks in favor of the application who wish to testify?
I have Terry Bishaw.
And just a point of order, can the applicant also provide testimony in favor of the applicant or the application?
It just gives me the address. That's it. Doesn't tell me if they're in favor or not.
Teresa Bishaw spoke already, so
Okay.
the main applicant.
Yeah. I have Jonathan Wassman.
That's close. And you already have mine on file, and it's I was against it, and then I spoke to Chris Pickering, and I changed my mind, and now I approve of what they're doing very much. So thank you. So basically, I'd like you to rescind my letter.
Great, thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
That's actually all I have.
Okay, just checking for everyone else who's tuned in. If you would like to provide testimony. Okay, I see one for against. So is there any additional testimony in favor of the application? Okay.
Julie Shaw, but she does, I need her address. Didn't put her address in the, but she's against.
Okay. Next, we will move to neither in favor nor opposed. I don't see anything in the chat, but just making sure. Okay. And
Yep.
now we can move forward to opposed to the application. Oh, sorry, it looks like we do have a neutral. So
Yeah.
Michael, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and I'll start your 3 minutes.
Yes, hello, everyone. Michael Roman, I live at 694 10th Street, almost catty corner. More just a question of clarification. If the Catholic Community Services were to decide to either sell the property or change it to one of those other uses as outlined in the previous presentation, you know, like a light use commercial, could you explain what that process would look like? Because under the current presentation, proposal, I understand it is to expand services, needed services, in my opinion, for the community. But just curious what that could look like if they were to sell the property, change it, and what that would be for the public interface and approval, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And staff or the applicant can address your questions after testimony. Okay, so I'm not seeing any further neutral comments. So we'll move on to opposed. So Julie, go ahead and you can unmute yourself. Okay, there we go.
Okay, yeah, I had to figure it out. Our concern is of I know they want to house families, but they've tried that before with the day use and it got out of hand. And my concern is there going to be staffing there to overlook this and monitor it to take care of the situation if it does get out of hand? Because I see I just don't want this neighborhood to get trashed by what I've seen in Eugene. That's all. And I'm concerned about the property value and also, I wanted to know if the building is commercial, are they going to assist in the taxes on it, or does it non-tax base because of it being a service? Those are things.
Thank you, Julie. And as I stated earlier, staff and or the applicant can address your questions and comments after the testimony has concluded.
Okay.
I have another testimony in the chat. So Gregory, go ahead. You can unmute yourself and I'll start your 3 minutes.
Okay. My concern is kind of along the same line as Julie. From our house on 10th, we get quite a few people that walk past with the food boxes, and we collect a lot of the food that they discard from those food boxes. A lot of trash, a lot of other stuff that just kind of appears in the yard from people coming and going from that facility. So yeah, what can we do about security, about protecting the sanctity of the neighborhood, that kind of thing? That's my main concern.
Thank you, Gregory. Okay, so just a last call for anybody who would like to provide testimony. Please put your name in the chat, or you can just wave your hand. I know Zoom is not ideal public hearings. Okay, so now we can move forward to the applicant's rebuttal. So Teresa or anybody else with the applicant. Chris, go ahead.
I'd be more happy to answer a couple of those questions. First of all, the services that we're currently providing are not going to change. We currently have 2 huts and 2 tiny houses in our parking lot that are housing homeless families. And we're not going to increase those at this time. We are not going to have homeless families moving into any part of our building. We did have time several years in the past where we partnered with another community agency, and we did have homeless individuals and couples without children that were actually housed in our community room. And it was an issue. And we tried that and it didn't work well. And we're not planning to do that again. The Oasis program has been in existence for several years now. And we haven't had the police called out for families. We've had quite the opposite. We've had families that have been housed. The success rate for getting the families housed from our parking lot in those Conestoga huts and those tiny houses have been, we've been very successful. Those families that are in those huts and houses out there right now are using a shower trailer in the parking lot, and they're using a kitchen at the church, and they're using the wash machine and laundry facilities in our building. So they're kind of going around in this circle, and we're hoping at some point we'll get this addition built at our 1025 G Street, be able to bring all that together so that they'll go to one location and they'll have a shower there in that space, a kitchen in that space, and be able to access the laundry facility. And we'll have the space to be able to better serve them with finding housing and job searches and the things they're doing right now out of a little tiny room that we have at the church. So that's our hope. The services that we're providing are not going to change. We're not going to change that. And as for the trash, I'm not sure how far you are away from our office. We've been encouraging the staff to do block walks and clean up the trash. And I will talk with the staff and make sure that they're doing that again. But one of the issues that we face is that we have clients, a lot of the clients that are unhoused right now, they take food boxes and they think when they get in there, they want to take the food with them. And then as they leave, it starts to get heavy. And so they start to discard things. And so we try really hard to encourage them to not take so much with them because they can come back more frequently. Food for Lane County has been really great about decreasing the limits so they can come more frequently. And so it's not something that they're used to though, because they used to only be able to come once a month and get a food box, and now they can come more frequently. So we're working really hard to try to teach them that they can come more frequently so they don't have to take all those things when they come with them. So they stop taking so much, and then they get a block or two away and it's a lot for them to carry. When you don't have a lot, you see those things and you think, oh my goodness, I need this, I want this, because you don't know when you're going to get it again. And so that's why they drop those things, because they can't carry them when they get further. They want it, they need it, but then they can't carry it. And so we try to be good neighbors and do those block sweeps. And I'll talk with the staff about that. And as for security, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by security. We police our parking lots if we see any issues come up, and issues do come up. That's what happens when you're serving people that have mental health issues. They have drug and alcohol issues. When you're unhoused, you do what you can to survive. These are our neighbors. That's who they are. They're our neighbors. They're your neighbors too. So we're doing the best that we can, and they're doing the best that they can. But if there's an issue that you have someone, come and talk to us. If you're having an issue with trash, come to the front desk and talk to us. We're here to help you. We're here to help them. If there's anything we can do, if there's an issue, just come and talk with us. My contact information is on our website, www.ccslc.org. I'm Chris Pickering. I'm the operations director. If you're having an issue, call me. We'll see what we can do to work it out. We are your neighbors. We want to help you. We want to address it. So feel free to reach out to us. Reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Teresa, did you have anything to add?
Yes, just briefly. I wanted to respond to the concern raised regarding what if the property is sold? And that's a great question, and I can understand concerns from neighbors. I will say that approval of the zone change will allow a significant financial investment in the building and the property, and will really help reinforce the long-term hold on the property by the Catholic Community Services. So in that sense, it helps to solidify the use. The other thing I would mention is the neighborhood commercial zoning does limit the size, the scale, and the intensity of commercial uses. So there are certain uses that are generally not seen as compatible, such as a wrecking yard, or maybe a large automobile sales lot or something. Those types of uses aren't allowed in the neighborhood commercial zone. They're really oriented towards services for the neighborhood. So we strongly encourage the Planning Commission to support this application, and we thank everyone for testifying this evening, and hope you reach out to Chris if you have further questions or concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you to everyone who provided testimony tonight. Now is the time for the commission to ask possible questions to the applicant, staff, or persons who have testified. This is not deliberations yet, still time for questions. So just wanted to clarify that. And we'll have Commissioner Cuevila kick it off, followed by Commissioner Gill.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for staff. Thank you, Ms. Bishop, for bringing up the community commercial. My question for staff is, what would be the most intense use for that property should it be sold under the community commercial? Please.
Thanks, Commissioner Cuevila. I believe as outlined in the applicant's traffic study, you could have a fast food restaurant. You could have a convenience store at that location. Those would probably be the most intensive uses on the site pertaining to generating traffic and trips to the site. Not necessarily the size of the building. It may require, I guess, a balancing act between on-site parking to provide for the amount of traffic and parking need for the site versus the amount of floor area that the site could sustain. You could have accommodations on the site. So there are a variety of uses, but as Teresa had mentioned, some of the more intensive uses that you would associate with community commercial would not be typical to the site, because it's and commercial is quirky in that its location, proximate to the school might lend itself to redevelopment of a certain type, maybe Subway or McDonald's or something like that, but it's not really on a major street. It doesn't have the same exposure as Centennial, for example, nearby, or 10th and Main, or some of the other streets nearby. So while it could be redeveloped, commercial land economics would probably not lend itself to something that would be, maybe a Dairy Mart, that type of use possibly could go on the site, and that would be essentially a convenience store that would be to serve the neighborhood, not Springfield as a whole. And so I think that's the kind of magnitude of, and there are similar. There's a I think it's Friends Market that's just to the west near Willamette Lane Park, that's tucked into the neighborhood there, and I see people walking to that store. There's the Dairy Mart off Pioneer Parkway as an example. So that would be the kind of redevelopment that I would speculate would go back on that site. It could be offices. It could be something that would be redeveloped as a medical office, maybe a school administrative office or something else. Not necessarily something that's going to generate a lot of trips. It could be redeveloped with something that is, some other type of office or commercial use that is more, I guess, professional offices, a planning office, satellite, engineering office or something like that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gill.
In follow-up to the testimony from Mr. Roman, could you explain, if that were to happen, what if there's a site plan review required or any kind of review with that change of activity within that zoning, if it were to change? Could you explain what that process might look like and how the community might engage in that?
Sure. So another charitable services organization or very similar use to what is currently occurring on the site could move in almost seamlessly. If it was mimicked, it was a different organization, but essentially mimicked what is occurring on the site already and utilized the site, and there was no real outward change. So that could occur. And not necessarily generate a need for notification to the neighborhood or anything like that. And the intent and the idea being that it's not Catholic Community Services, it's X services, and basically the same type of activities are occurring. It doesn't generate that land use action. If the site were to be demolished and redeveloped with a new building, it would require site plan review. If it were to be changed to something other than charitable services on the site, it would likely require site plan review. A change of use would not be something that could occur in a generally residential neighborhood because of the surrounding residential. It requires a higher level of land use review that requires notification. Should there be a change of occupancy, a change of tenancy on the site, or change of activity. The proposal to add floor space, additional building space on the site also would trigger that site plan review. And that would also be an opportunity for adjacent property owners, residents, and the interested public to review the plans, to look at how traffic's being handled, the drainage management on the site, utilities, access, that sort of thing, how those will be accommodated on the site. And I believe that is the next step that the applicant was going to be undertaking, was site plan review, and that would allow for people to review the plans in advance and comment on them in advance of any approval. That will be the next step should the rezoning occur.
Thank you.
I have a quick question, also following up on some testimony we've received. So it's my understanding that we cannot base our decision on whether the intended use would be subject to property taxes. So just confirming that that's not a criteria of approval and is not something we can consider.
Correct. And I don't know if Christina wants to weigh in on this, but the city, as it is, the city of Springfield is not the taxing authority anyway. So the city does not differentiate amongst what the sort of the benefit, the taxable benefit would be to the city if a nonprofit agency, a religious institution, a school, a utility, the city itself obtains the property and then was not, contributing taxes to it. It's looked at globally, the entire city of Springfield, and all of the land base is factored in for the county assessment, and then the city receives the assessment, based on the mill rate and that sort of thing. So it's not something that is considered because it would be potentially discriminatory to be looking at, well, we have a better use in mind. We want someone that's going to be contributing to the taxes, not this non-taxpayer. So that's not something that's factored into a land use decision like this.
I just wanted to confirm I agree with what Andy said.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the commission? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing and or the public record. Would anyone like to move to close the public hearing and or the public record? Commissioner Landon.
I move to close the public hearing. Are those done as two separate actions, or can they be combined?
I believe the motion can be combined. Point of order. Okay, perfect.
All right, I would like to move that we close both the public hearing and the public record.
I'll second.
Motion to close the public hearing and the public record made by Commissioner Landon, seconded by Commissioner Gill. I'll do a roll call vote. I'll start with myself. Aye. Vice Chair Landon.
Aye.
Commissioner Cuevila.
Yes.
Commissioner Gill.
Aye.
Commissioner Bergen.
Aye.
And Commissioner Salazar.
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. Okay. Do we have any discussion of the application? I guess I can start. Just thank you to the applicant and all those associated with the applicant, as well as staff for all of the work put into this. I think the staff report was comprehensive and informational, and just kudos for that. Commissioner Gill.
Agreed. Thanks to staff and the applicants and everyone who testified. I always really appreciate hearing the testimony and how folks are feeling. I will say the zoning discussions are always challenging to me because it's about the zoning and not about what's happening on the property. So I want to make really clear that the decision we're talking about is about the zoning, and the site plan review comes later. And so sort of sussing out the case making for the zoning is challenging because it also is related to the use that's there now and what they want to continue to do, but it also does have the larger impact of being a zoning change. So I find that is always challenging for me to really focus in on what the decision making is and the criteria. I do think this meets the criteria. I support the staff findings. And I appreciate hearing the affirmation that should changes of use occur, that there will be a public process for that. My understanding of, based on the language of this kind of commercial zoning, is really to provide the opportunity for services within a residential area. And this residential area actually is very close to a lot of other services. So I'm not sure that it might be as needed here as it could be in other residential neighborhoods. That said, it is also next to a lot of public spaces by which people could use and would value commercial services. And also having sort of appropriate zoning to what's actually happening is important. And I did also want to point out, just because it wasn't talked about very deeply in the hearing, in case people do have concerns about housing and the loss of the potential for housing with this zone change to be a possibility on that acre of land, that the report and the findings really addressed that very carefully and thoroughly. And I think that that alleviates a lot of those concerns when I know housing is an issue everywhere and in our community for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gill. Is there any further discussion on the application? Commissioner Cuevla, I see you're unmuted, but I don't know if that means you want to speak.
Oh, sure. I'll go ahead and weigh in. I did note that it is possible to extend the non-conforming use and still do the expansion. And to my thinking, that provides a level of certainty in the neighborhood that there would not be further changes of the sort that Catholic Community Services could sell the property, demolish the building, and there would be something like a Dairy Mart or a McDonald's or something like that put up in there. A zone change is, I believe in this case, would be almost a forever thing. And I'm a little concerned about changing the zoning, even though I know that all the intention of staying on the property and continuing to do the essential work that Catholic Community Services does there is the general intention. But you know, my concern is 8 years down the road, 10 years down the road. These are old buildings. They are being rehabilitated, but they may not serve Catholic Community Services much longer. With the needs we've got, they may want to relocate and get into a larger piece of property with better parking and more modern utilities, et cetera. So that's my concern. And I'm going to have to say that I think that probably staying with the non-conforming use and then going through the process of applying for the expansion in that, I think would be the wisest thing for the neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cuevla. I'll put myself in the queue. I struggle with this as well, because while the existing use, is there and exists, land use decisions are based on just what could be allowed on that area. And so I'm struggling with, if there was nothing there, would this application be successful in rezoning from low density residential to neighborhood commercial? And I think some of the components, make sense, that its location and the current uses that it's proximate to. And I struggle. I also know that, as a professional planner, I don't like non-conforming uses. It's bad to have non-conforming uses. So that's where it's like, oh, I would love to see this be a conforming use. And I wonder if there's an alternate path, where we could revise the code to add this use as a discretionary use to land zoned low density residential, so that it's not non-conforming, but still would have to go through discretionary process to determine whether it's appropriate. And I recognize that the applicant has already gone through a land use process that's taken time and resources. So I would say right now I'm struggling. I'm not decided, and I would like to hear more from the commission about where they stand. There there's anyone who is strongly in support, we could also just move directly into vote for a recommendation. Let's see where the commission is. Commissioner Bergen.
It seems to be a common theme that I'm not standing on one side or the other specifically, strongly one way or the other. When looking at the criteria of approval, this appears to meet the criteria of approval. It is difficult to think about what could be here in the future, and understanding that this is a really strong neighborhood that has a lot of rich history in our community, and the community members that live in this neighborhood are really important. And knowing that we do have the future of our community going to school in the same neighborhood, that's really important as well to keep in mind. But I think it's also important to, as Chair McGinley had mentioned, to not focus on what's there, but is this the highest and best use of this land? This specific building has been there since the mid-60s, with, to be honest, probably very little chance of being open doors as far as homes, units for housing. The housing crisis is really important and top of mind, and something that we're talking about consistently. For those that tuned in before this session, we are talking about the code changes and whatnot. So this is really important stuff we're talking about, and none of us are, the fact that none of us are strongly one way or another shows that we're conflicted with the decision, and realize the weight that it carries. And yeah, it is a decision that could be made forever, but it could also be adjusted in the future as well. So I think that if we take a step back and look at what's the highest and best use for this parcel, it is in a neighborhood, but it's not in the center, meaning that there's other buildings and structures and community used buildings around it. So it's a really good mixture of the community and the neighborhood itself. So I'm leaning in favor, but I don't know. I don't have a strong conviction one way or the other.
Thank you, Commissioner Bergen. That was a good reminder that we are proposing changes to the development code right now, after we conclude with this item. And, if there's an alternate path that could be explored of looking at the uses that are allowed, in each of the zones, as we make our recommendation to City Council. So again, I just wish this was a discretionary use in low density residential and it was a different process, because I do struggle with seeing this be an appropriate lot for neighborhood commercial, without knowing, removing the existing use from it, because and it's hard to do that because I'm so grateful for the existing use and wish to see it continue there and would like to find a way for it to be a conforming use on that lot. And yeah, again, just struggling with being able to fully support a rezone. Any other discussion from the commission? Commissioner Salazar.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if I could ask Andy again to explain if the applicant, if we weren't to approve this rezone, what steps the applicant would have to take in order to undergo an expansion with the non-conforming use. And I know you mentioned it before, but just to explain it again, I think in terms of where I'm at, I'm also on the fence. I understand that this is a very needed service in our community, but also thinking about the implications of a zone change are not taken lightly.
Sure, thanks, Commissioner Salazar. I believe that in light of this action, should it fail, staff would look to have the expansion of a non-conforming use elevated, if not automatically, it would be a type 3 discretionary action. And so it would be brought back to the Planning Commission at a public hearing for the expansion of the non-conforming use in association with a site plan. So similar to a discretionary use permit where there is an allowable use that has to meet the criteria of discretionary use within the city's development code, it could be potentially approved concurrently. So it would be similar to a discretionary use permit brought to the Planning Commission along with the site plans, which may provide some context for what is being proposed, because it would have the benefit of a site plan showing basically the request. What is the ask? We're going to modify the parking lot. We're going to add some square footage to the building. We're going to change our driveway, whatever the actual site modifications are. And that would be packaged with the expansion of non-conforming use request and brought back to the commission.
Thank you, Andy.
Mark, go ahead. Unless that was an error.
Sorry, not an error, just a delay in getting my headset plugged back in. And I wonder if I could ping Christina Kraz here for a second. I've been tracking the conversation and I have been involved in this project from the beginning, and I'm searching back in my email files, looking at some of the pre-communications on this project. It dates back to August of last year. But Christina, and I don't know if you recall specifically, I thought there was some discussion that we determined that this isn't actually a non-conforming use, that it couldn't be expanded. And I'm wondering, I did find an email that I sent to, I think, the architect at the time, the representative. Andrew, is that you? Andrew's nodding his head. I think we laid out 3 options. And one of the 3 was not expansion of a non-conforming use. And I think it revolved around Andy discussed this previously. I know the hearing's closed, so I don't want to interject information at this point that's not appropriate. But I think the conversation around that there is an option to do an expansion of a non-conforming use may not be entirely accurate. Because I think when the church ceased the use, the new use that was started by the new ownership, I think and it may have actually been owned by the city or CETA at one point for an interim period of time. We did a bunch of research on this, and I'm sorry I don't have it at my fingertips. But, and then it went from CETA, and I see Chris nodding her head as well. I believe it went from CETA ownership to Catholic Community Services. So in actuality, I think what we're probably dealing with is a use that essentially isn't a legal use at all on the property. And to legalize the use, it's not a non-conforming use because it was never established in a mechanism that would have been allowed and then became non-conforming. So anyway, just wanting to highlight this, and Christina, I'll defer to you as well. But
I think procedurally, this is some new information for the commission. I think we need to allow the applicant an opportunity to respond. But I can provide more context. I also want to urge the Planning Commission that the fact that another application may be available as a way to accomplish someone's development goals is not a criteria of approval. So you would need to base your decision on what the criteria of approval are. The fact that there are different avenues with different consequences or ramifications is a better word, different ramifications for future site development. That is not a criteria of approval in and of itself. And so the decision does need to be based on the relevant policies in the comp plan and the other criteria of approval. And there are specific policies around where neighborhood commercial uses belong. But the research that Mark alludes to, and then we can give the applicant an opportunity to respond, the non-conforming use option would be, was not one of the ones that was raised originally in my conversations with Mark. It was ability to seek discretionary use approval to allow a church site, and then churches, if Catholic Community Services could demonstrate their use was a church site, there are ancillary publics like community services that are in line with a religious mission that are allowed in conjunction with church sites. But I don't believe that I can't state whether or not we could approve a non-conforming use of this site because we need information that shows the use was lawfully established at the time it was established and has continued uninterrupted for more than 6 months since then. And I don't believe there's any evidence in this specific record of your decision now that establishes whether it is truly a lawful non-conforming use that can be continued and expanded, or whether it is a sort of non-conforming use that has never been permitted, and we face a mismatch between the use of the property and the zoning.
Thank you, Mark and Christina. Did the applicant want to respond to that?
Yes, this is Teresa Bishop, and Chris, just unmute yourself if you want to add as well. I appreciate the distinction between a legal non-conforming use and simply a non-conforming use. The fundamental purpose or a key reason for zoning is the city wants to phase out what on the use list is not allowed or permitted and is non-conforming. And that's the situation we have, is that charitable services are not listed as a permitted use in the low density residential zone. So Catholic Community Services is a non-conforming use, and they legally can't expand in that non-conforming situation. If the church that originally was constructed on the property at that time in the 60s, churches were still fairly benign and small scale, and they tended to serve a very immediate neighborhood. As churches grew in size and became very, very large, cities began to not allow them in the low density residential zones, like Willamette Christian Center in Eugene or First Baptist Church out in North Eugene, those mega churches. So you have a case where historically, when the building was built, the church was allowed, it was a permitted, legally established use. Once it became a non-church use, whether it was for a day or a year or, you know, however long it was, as soon as a different occupant went into that building, it lost its legal non-conforming status. So I just encourage you to, there's really one land use application before you. And if you believe that they've operated successfully on the site, and you believe that the services are needed as demonstrated by the city council's awarding of a grant for the Oasis program, I just really encourage you to vote in support of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.
Yes, and if I could have, Andrew is here and he's our architect, and he had some communication back and forth with Mark and can kind of address where we were at with this application to kind of answer that, because I think what you were getting at before about it either being a church or that, if you could kind of address that, Andrew.
Thank you, Chris. And just a quick point of clear. I don't even know why I'm forgetting the word. Point of order for Christina. I feel like a lot of new information is coming in. Should we reopen the record or?
Yeah, you may. I mean, it's up to you. I think the applicant always gets the last word. We want to make sure the applicant does. If the commission feels that more opportunity for others to submit written information in response to this new information would be helpful, then certainly you can leave the record open. I haven't heard a request to do that from someone yet, but you always have that option if you feel providing more opportunity to respond. The important aspect procedurally is that the applicant gets the final opportunity to respond to any new information that's raised, whether that's in the final sort of staff response or you know, after we're sort of curing it by allowing that limited additional testimony. But you could choose to reopen the hearing for more individuals to speak this evening. You could choose to open the record again, and then with a specific date that it would be closed. We can talk through the 777 rule for 7 more days for general public testimony, followed by 7 days for response to that new testimony from anyone, followed by 7 days for the applicant to respond. Or if there's no request from the applicant to leave the record open, you can also allow 7 days for any response to new information that was raised just in the second portion, with 7 days for the applicant to respond to after that. So a 7 and 7. I think that you have a lot of options at your disposal, but this is bringing up some new information following the close of your hearing. So up to you how you want to handle that.
Okay, thank you. And Mark, did you have a staff point on that to add?
And probably Andrew was going to say this. I'm just clicking through old emails here, trying to find the logic train. And in fact, I did find an email I sent to Andrew. I copied Christina Kras on this email on September 7th of last year. The application they had indeed applied for originally was for an expansion of a non-conforming use together with a site plan application. We advised them that that was not an application we could process, that it did not constitute an expansion of a non-conforming use, and laid out 3 options for them to pursue, one being the zone change application, the others being an amendment to the code to allow service uses in the LDR, or the argument that was talked about of that they're a church under the LDR zone. So anyway, they did apply for expansion of a non-conforming use, and we basically told them that that is not an application we could have processed.
Thank you, Mark. And since the applicant has the last word, I see Chris has their camera on.
I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood. We've been doing this here for a long time, and I don't know what impact it would be. Bear in mind, application fees are expensive. And with every application now you have, every application fee that we spend, all of those dollars is less funding we're going to spend on the clients that we serve. So bear that in mind. And the other thing is we are looking to expand our services. So we're looking at, we just received funding from CDBG for over $300,000 to add to our space, our building. So in looking at, down the road, that would be a long ways down the road. We're looking at expanding our building. So we just put new siding on our building. We just put new windows in our building. We're getting our building painted when the weather dries out. So that would be a long ways down the road. So we're your neighbors. We're here. We've been here for a long time. So just keep that in mind, please. Thank you. And thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so I would like to request that further discussion from the commission points directly to criteria of approval or any findings, just so we can move this along. So just as a reminder, the criteria of approval are consistency with applicable Metro Plan policies and the Metro Plan diagram, consistency with applicable refinement plans, plan district maps, conceptual development plans, and functional plans. The property is presently provided with adequate public facilities, services, and transportation networks to support the use, or these facilities, services, and transportation networks are planned to be provided concurrently with the development of the property. And the legislative zoning map amendments that involve a Metro Plan diagram amendment shall meet the approval criteria specified in section 5.14-100 and comply with the Oregon Administrative Rule OAR 660-012-0060 where applicable. So I can start with Commissioner Salazar, followed by Commissioner Cuevila.
Thank you, Chair. I think when we're looking at the conditions of approval, I've been convinced by staff and by the applicant's initial presentations, their materials that they provided, that all the conditions of approval have been met. I'll also note that the original staff recommendation included no recommended conditions of approval, which is something that we see rarely. Usually we see some sort of condition for approval. And in this case, I think it's fairly clear to me that the conditions are met. So under that criteria, I would say that this looks like it passes muster.
Thank you, Commissioner Salazar. Commissioner Cuevila.
Being that we've gotten all this new information from Mark and from the applicant, which has been provided after the public record was closed, I'm going to suggest that we get an amended package and revisit this at a future meeting. I can't see any reason not to have corrected information, which this is the email chain that apparently went between Mark and the city attorney's office, etc. I think all that needs to be in the package to explain the three paths that he explained, just to be complete in our deliberations.
Commissioner Cuevila, a point of clarification. Christina spoke earlier and said that the existence of other potential paths could not be a criteria of approval for the decision tonight. Is there additional information received tonight that are not addressed in the staff findings and applicant narrative?
As I said, I think that the package was incomplete in that there were additional information items that needed to be in the package that explained because we didn't have a correct explanation of the non-conforming use, et cetera. So I think the package needs to be reassembled with that information and brought back to us at a future date.
Thank you. I'm just not I'm not sure I'm following. So what information that you learned tonight was not included in the package that is applicable to or subject to the criteria of approval and not included in the staff narrative and findings?
The 3 pathways toward keeping the property in use. So I think that it, as I said, I believe we've been presented with some information both earlier before the record was closed that was in error, and then after the record was closed, we're presented with additional information. And to me, it just creates a muddle of information that we need to have that put together in a corrected package and then look at it again at a future meeting. So that's my point.
Thank you, Commissioner Quibla. I'll put myself in the queue and just say that it's my opinion that the information about the alternate paths is not relevant to the criteria of approval for this application tonight. So I personally do not see any need to extend the record or reassemble the package, but I would like to hear from the rest of the commission if you believe there is more information needed to make the decision. Commissioner Gill.
Well, while I like to have all the information all in one place, I think I'm still where I was at the beginning, which is this is always challenging. Zone changes are big, but I believe that the criteria of approval have been met and the findings, I support the staff findings. I don't think additional information about alternative possibilities changes the fact that the criteria have been met.
Thank you, Commissioner. Christina, I saw you switch your camera on. I don't know if that means you'd like to speak.
I don't know if this is the best time to provide this guidance, but I do think given the amount of public testimony you received, including written comments that Andy did not have a chance to incorporate into the staff report because they were received after the packet was posted, we do need to address public comments in the final version of the staff report. So based on whatever direction you provide tonight, for your final decision, I do recommend bringing the final staff report back to you in 2 weeks for adoption. But I will leave to you the direction on what, other than response to public comment, if there are other findings you would like to receive. And then if you leave the record open, obviously you'll need to, we'll need to incorporate any information that's received in any record extension if you choose to do that. I just wanted to provide that context. And I think Andy can talk about when that could come back for final approval based on what you decide in terms of timing on record.
Thank you, Christina. Commissioner Gill.
So sort of additional question to that, then if we get the information, if we ask for the findings or information about the alternative options be included in the staff report, is it necessary to open the public record for that, or is that just a finding that we ask of staff for that report? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, you could direct staff to provide that information. I don't recommend, my recommendation is not to include other potential options in the staff report because it is unrelated to any criteria of approval, and that I thought it was a good thing. I think that Mark raised it for just sort of context, given where the Planning Commission's discussion was going, but those were not, that was sort of the type of problem solving that staff do over the counter or sometimes behind the counter with potential applicants about what does staff feel like might be supported in terms of the types of applications that might be the most, successful or a good strategy. And my concern with putting those options in a Planning Commission order is that it gives the there's no record on whether the Planning Commission could approve a discretionary use for a church at the site, because that's not an application that's been filed. And so I would not want to put in a packet that the Planning Commission was going to adopt that stated they could file for a discretionary use application, because anybody can file for one. It sort of gives it an improper air of approval on the part of the Planning Commission that would be appropriate when you don't have that record before you, and that's not the application that was filed, in addition to it not being related to the criteria of approval. So that's my concern with writing that into the staff report.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you. Sandy, I see your hand is up.
Good evening, commissioners. I would recommend, as a way to address Commissioner Cuevola's concern and some of what Christina was just saying, is that as Andy addresses the public comment in a revised set of findings, that he also expand on the introduction and explain that Catholic Community Services had initially applied for an expansion of a non-conforming use, but that staff had said that that was not the appropriate path. And so Catholic Community Services then went through the rezoning. And so that doesn't get into all the options that staff had provided, but it does provide the history, which is relevant, that expansion of a non-conforming use was considered and not processed. So I think that can get you to where you need to be for the commission. And I don't think you need to allow additional testimony to address that. So that could be brought back to you at a future meeting without the record being left open.
Thank you, Sandy. Andy, could you provide us with a timeline for what continued deliberations look like and when they would occur?
I don't have the meeting calendar in front of me. I think we'd probably be looking at about a month away.
I do have the calendar in front of me.
Yeah, I'm already we have an agenda item that the packet is currently being prepared for in 2 weeks for another rezoning application.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I guess it's the report has been substantially complete. I guess based on if that is if the intent is to have the public comments incorporated into that report that was presented to you tonight and brought back in 2 weeks, without holding the record open and allowing for applicant rebuttal to anything received, it's probably doable to get it back in before you on the 15th. If not, then it would have to be pushed to probably the second meeting in March.
Our calendar on February 15th is quite full. If we still have deliberations on the Development Code Update project, it's possible we could go March 1st. There's time there. Our March 15th is also full. If Sandy approves it, we could go there, or it would be April 5th.
Thank you, Brenda and Andy. Sandy, I see your hand up. Do we need to be date certain before? Okay, so
I was just going to say, I don't think you need to be date certain. It's not like there's a public component to this, so we can bring it back when we have it ready for your deliberation.
okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Landon, did you have an additional comment?
Well, I was just going to ask, I mean, is something 2 weeks or a month from now going to substantially change? I'm not hearing that new testimony is going to flare up. We've kind of, I'll confess, I thought presenter did a good job. What's going to come up? What's going to change in 2 weeks or a month?
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Landon. I would like to propose, I guess, does it need to be a motion to point of order? Does it need to be a motion to table until further deliberations?
You haven't made a motion to approve anything yet, so you don't need to table it. You can just ask staff to bring it back. It would be helpful. I don't know if Andy's got the direction he needs. It would be helpful to confirm that the majority of the commission does want to approve based on criteria of approval as they've been outlined, with some additional explanation about the site context in response to public comment. I think that's what I heard. I just want to make sure.
Okay, so would like to see from the commission if, yeah, just what your general, where you are lying right now, Commissioner Gill.
So I'm generally in support. I would like to follow Christina's recommendation that the staff report include the public testimony that came in, since the staff report was created, so that is fully up to date, and we add the suggested introductory information, or staff adds the suggested introductory information as Sandy proposed.
Thank you, Commissioner Salazar.
I also support that the conditions of approval have been met, and would be supportive of that pending an updated staff report.
Thank you. I concur. Okay, so I would entertain a motion to approve with the direction to staff to amend the, sorry, no, I'm so, Christina's shaking her head.
Yeah,
So it looks like we have consensus, general consensus to move this to a further date, and have, we'd like to direct staff to bring further information in the introduction and the findings related to public testimony. Is that, are we all covered there? Okay, great.
Not quite. We also need to include Sandy Belson's introductory paragraph regarding the application not meeting criteria for change in non-conforming use.
Correct, the addition of introductory material. Okay, so that concludes this item. We earlier had discussed revisiting the development code update project deliberations. I wanted to do a temperature check. It's almost 8:40 and we have some other business on our agenda. I was told by staff that we could potentially continue our deliberations on February 22nd. Is that correct, staff?
I would say it's at, can you hear me okay? I would say, yeah, that's at your discretion if you wanted to hold a special meeting on February 22nd. It's not a regularly scheduled planning commission meeting. The reason for that is that the agenda for your next meeting on February 15th is rather full. We do have a placeholder on your next agenda on February 15th. However, that would make for a fairly long night. You will be having a public hearing on the Main Street Safety Facility Plan on the 15th, as well as another public hearing on another different zoning map amendment project. So I'll leave it to your discretion. You could have a long night on the 15th and or schedule a special meeting on the 22nd. I think it looks like, and I forget what Brenda was just saying about March 1st, the agenda calendar I'm looking at shows there is time on March 1st. I think extending it out that far at this point pushes the amount of time that the planning commission would have to make a formal recommendation, but it feels like we're getting closer. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
You're correct, Mark. On March 1st, there's an item that if we don't have deliberation on the 15th, that we can move this item to the 15th. And March 1st would be completely open. So that's at everyone's discretion.
Thank you, Mark and Brenda. Commissioner Gill, and then I'll put myself in the queue.
At the risk of having everybody want to murder me, I'm up for like another half hour to see how far we could get, but I'm open to doing another meeting if needed.
Thank you, Commissioner Gill. I think I could also go for another half hour. And I would prefer we not hold a special session on the 22nd, as I have a work commitment, and I think these deliberations are really essential to be present at, because we'd be coming to our final recommendation, and would be open for the March 1st. Commissioner Bergen.
Thank you. I too do have a little bit of stamina left in me. My question on the special session for the 22nd, with the day before, which is the Monday being President's Day, does that mean that council would be meeting the 22nd? And so we would need to move to that Wednesday potentially, if that was the case. I am here for whatever is best for the group. But as I said, I do have a little bit of stamina left.
Thank you. Commissioner Salazar.
I'm also for pushing through for another half hour.
Okay, great. Is anybody opposed to pushing through? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead. And then we can see where we get in about half an hour. So I guess we're revisiting that first criteria, which is minimum lot size. So I'm open to hearing further discussion there. My notes indicate that I had myself, Commissioner Gill, and Commissioner Salazar more in support of the 5,000 square foot max minimum lot size for triplexes and fourplexes, and Commissioner Landon, Commissioner Bergen, and Commissioner Cuevila for the 5,000 square foot minimum lot size for triplexes and 7,000 square foot minimum lot size for fourplexes. So let's start it off with Commissioner Gill.
So I guess I will say again, if we're gonna push for some good incentive stuff when we get to that section, I could be moved to switch to option 1 to move us forward, and also knowing that this is recommendation from Planning Commission, and perhaps we could write up that this was a challenging component to this and we really want them to consider those things, the city council, and that there is still public hearing time with council. So with all of that said, I could, to move us forward, switch to option 1, but I am all for the density options and using that opportunity for incentive.
Thank you, Commissioner Gill. Commissioner Bergen, and then I'll throw myself in the queue.
Thank you. So I think where I'm really struggling and stuck on option 1 is the fact of the parking, which I know that's not what we're talking about right now. And Christina, you were illustrating a point at the end of our discussion on this earlier, and I'll be quite honest, I wasn't quite tracking because it is my understanding that if we were to go below 5,000 or less, it is state mandate that we have to allow a maximum requirement of 0.5, and that's where I was starting to I wasn't tracking. So I'm hoping for a little bit more clarification. There's been a lot of research done over the years, and of course I don't have one in front of me specifically about well, I'm just going to try and lay it out there. It's not going to be as eloquent as I would like. But I think maybe this is a conversation for the parking piece which we've already talked about. But if what I'm struggling to find is what we're allowed for the minimum versus the 0.67 that we had that you had mentioned, Christina, at the end of the last session. I wasn't quite following, and I want to understand. I want to be on board so that we can promote more buildings. But I'm really stuck on the parking piece. And I think it is my understanding that this is one of the if this then that. And if we do 1.2, then we would have to go to 2.2. And it can't be 1.1 to 2.2. And I hope that that's making sense to everybody as I'm talking in a circle. I just am really struggling, and I really want to understand.
So I've got those slides ready, and I think maybe if I talk through this, it might be helpful. So the original parking, so we're talking about how parking is affected now. So this is the option 2.1, the first option under the parking that most of the Planning Commission supported. However, if you allow fourplexes to be 5,000 square feet, then that fourplex line has to become slightly more complex in that you have one standard. This is basically keeping with that spirit of require what the lowest maximum that the minimum maximum that the state allows. I don't know that I said that correct, but this is keeping with like tying it exactly to the state rules. Obviously you have a little more flexibility than this in some areas, but so for fourplexes only, your triplex stays the same because 5,000 square feet is the three parking spaces total for triplexes. For fourplexes, for lots that you're allowing to be smaller than that 7,000 square foot in the 5,000 to 7,000 square foot range, the state would not allow us to require more than 3 spaces total, which you divide that then by units, it's 0.67 spaces per unit. That was where that 0.67 came from. That number is not actually in the rule, but for consistency with how we talk about everything else, I put the 0.67 spaces per unit in there. And then for lots or parcels that are greater than or equal to 7,000 square feet, you have 1 space per dwelling unit. So if you go with option under lot size, option 2, then you would need this adjusted option 2.1, which is still very different than the option 2.2, which lowered everything. So you can see here what's highlighted is it would, the option 2.2 in the packet was just a half space per unit for everything, which is a greater reduction in that minimum than the state would require us to provide. Does that clarify? Commissioner Bergen, I'm hoping that helps. So make it really clear. So the starred version goes with everything's 5,000 square feet. The not starred version goes with it's 5,000 square feet for triplexes and 7,000 square feet for quadplexes, fourplexes.
Okay, so then the starred version would be 1.2. And the non-starred is 1.1 for the lot size of what we're talking about.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and per the law, where that's allowable.
Yes, this would match the state rules. I copy pasted this exactly from the middle housing rules and just added the only thing I added was this 0.6 spaces per dwelling unit, comma 3 spaces total. The 3 spaces total and this 4 lots or parcels language is all straight out of the rule. So it's just a copy paste. You could decide, I don't want to overcomplicate this, but you could just decide it's just going to be 3 spaces for all quadplexes. And that would be allowable because that's, you couldn't make it 5 or something bigger.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Bergen. I sat with something, I guess, during our 5-minute break earlier, and it was, I think Mark said that, through our townhome proposed code amendments, we would be allowing 1 unit on the minimum lot size for a townhome would be 1,000 square feet. And so you could have 4 townhomes, next to each other. That's 4,000 square feet with 4 units. And I'm struggling with the inconsistency of requiring fourplexes to be built on lots that are nearly twice the size when we would be allowing a townhome development of. Oh, Christina, I see your hands there.
Yeah, I think that is the smallest size for a townhome. But, and Elizabeth provided this information to staff earlier, so she might, I want to credit her for doing these calculations. We require an average overall size for a townhome development. So actually, when the math is done, a development of 4 townhomes, the minimum size is 7,000 square feet because of how that averaging works, even though an individual lot in the townhome development could be 1,000 square feet. So you could not have a 4-unit townhome under the current proposed code that was 4,000 square feet. And then the 5,000 square feet corresponds to the way that math would work out for triplexes because of those average lot size requirements.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for doing math after 8.
Thank Elizabeth. She did the math for us earlier in the week and explained it. She could probably jump in, but I want to credit her for doing that math. I just remembered it.
Great, thank you. So I think with that new information, so I concur with a lot of what Commissioner Gill said. I would like to see further incentives, and we'll get to that when we get to that. And I think with that new math coming out, with a set of 3 townhomes equaling 5,000 square feet and a set of 4 townhomes equaling 7,000 square feet, I would not be stoked, but I would be amenable to option 1. Commissioner Bergen.
Thank you. And this is, you bring up a really great point, because this is something in one of our previous deliberations that I had asked Mark about. If, for example, Senate Bill 458 changes everything, in my opinion. This example we see on the screen, if a triplex is built and they're all touching the ground on a 5,000 square foot minimum lot size, and then with Senate Bill 458, they can go in and do a subdivision of those, divide them out. We now have 3 units that are on their own tax lot that are now smaller square foot lot size than what we have for a single unit. So the same thing could be said on a single unit, a duplex at any point, because of 458 allows for those tax lots to be separated out. It really does change things. And then the ability to potentially put an ADU on it, and you can just spiral out of control from there. So I think you do bring an interesting point. And I remember bringing this to Mark, but Mark, I don't recall where the conversation went from there on like a triplex for what's on the screen, for example, or a fourplex.
Yeah, if I could just clarify one thing, I think I heard you just say, and that is after Senate Bill 458 would allow, say, a triplex to be divided, so each unit's on its own lot, and then you could add an ADU. That adding an ADU is not accurate. So even though, and we talked about this last week as well with the project team, and we came up with the term, we called them, just for discussion's sake, we called these junior lots. So the lots that would be created through Senate Bill 458 to divide middle housing aren't treated under state law the same as any other regular lot. So take a triplex, you divide it into 3 lots, you sell each unit, it's a single unit on 1 lot. Those are still considered, those were developed as a triplex and would not be allowed to add an ADU to each one of those individual units. And take that one step further, so that it feels like you have 1 lot with a single family home on it at that point, and middle housing says we have to allow a duplex on any lot that has a single family home. That would also not be true. So these junior lots, a lot created through the middle housing land division process, would still be kind of locked into how they were originally developed. So that 1 unit on 1 lot would still be one of 3 units that was originally developed as a triplex. So it'd basically be kind of, that's the most you could ever do on that, that lot. So hopefully I think that answers part of your question, but it does get confusing.
Clarification on the ADU and whatnot. Just a quick question, if I may, Chair McGinley, back to Mark. On that, so I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but with the, I love the term junior lot. It really helps me differentiate. And so I'm wondering if those will have a different zone code. So in the future, when someone who purchases that and doesn't do the subdivision through 458, but purchases it that way, is there a way that they will know, or staff will know when someone comes in to add an ADU or add a second unit to make it a duplex, detached or attached? Is there a way, are we doing different zone codes on that, or any differentiation to where it will be obvious? We're trying to make everything easier for our community members to build and whatnot. Is that something that we're thinking about doing?
And I saw Christina pop up on her video, so I'll let her respond. I think the short answer from my mind is no, we haven't contemplated a separate zone or some kind of clarification label. I think we would be tracking that in our permitting software system. But Christina, did you have a thought on that as well?
The statute does allow, and the proposed code suggest or would require a restrictive covenant placed on the property that explains that. And that was actually an issue, this uncertainty about whether then those lots become, you know, duplex eligible or ADU eligible, and what that would mean, and sort of creating ways that people could game a system to evade requirements that the city council ultimately adopts for middle housing. That was a concern that I think Mark actually provided in testimony to the legislature when that bill was being considered, and they added that explicitly into the draft to note that those parcels do not become further developable with other types of housing. They have this junior sort of status. So that would be recorded. And then when someone's purchasing, I mean, as you know, Commissioner Bergen is a real estate agent, when someone's doing their due diligence and purchasing a home, they would typically have a title report run, and the title company would find those exceptions sort of to, or any encumbrances on title, like easements and that kind of a thing. So that should come up in a title search, and it's something that we would require be recorded with that expedited land division plat per the draft code. But of course, people forget about that stuff over time. I mean, everybody forgets about that stuff over time. So whether people will really know, you know, 15 years after they buy their house, what it was, how it's encumbered, you know, 10 years later, who knows? People, but that's not, I mean, that's something we see on all lots sort of all the time. People forget, oh, that part of my front yard is actually the right of way, and I don't own that, or, you know, whatever.
Thank you, Christina. Commissioner Cuevila, followed by myself.
So would there be no opportunity for condominium division of an existing parcel on one of those junior lots as well, Mark?
Well, so in theory, a junior lot would only ever have one unit on it. A condominium isn't a land division. And so, but it would, there wouldn't be, say, 2 units to condominiumize on a junior lot. So I think the answer to your question is no, it wouldn't be available on a junior lot as we're talking about it.
Yeah, I was thinking of an internal division to a condominium.
Yeah, even internally, you would have to have 2 legal units, dwelling units, to be able to separately condominiumize, and you could only ever have 1 legal dwelling unit on one of those junior lots.
Thank you, Commissioner Cuevila and Mark. I just wanted to clarify, I work a lot with Senate Bill 458 and middle housing land division through my day job. And I just wanted to read some things from an FAQ that was published in Eugene, but I'm not speaking in my professional capacity or on behalf of the city of Eugene, I think it would just be helpful to clarify some common misconceptions around middle housing land divisions. So Senate Bill 458 is really solely for ownership purposes of middle housing units. It was created because there are some complications with the condoization process, with having to have a homeowners association and insurance and a bunch of stuff that is over my head. So it relates to middle housing because it is related to middle housing, and House Bill 2001. It has the same implementation timeline as House Bill 2001. In my day job, we refer to the lots as parent lots and child lots. So the standards for middle housing, so duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhomes, and cottage clusters must always apply to the parent lot, no matter what's on the child lot. So the parent lot must always fit those criteria of approval and standards. The difference between a partition and the middle housing land division is that a partition is a type of land use process that creates new legal lots. Those new legal lots would be granted full development rights. However, the Senate Bill 458 lot division, the middle housing land division, allows the creation of new lots within a legal parent lot solely for the purpose of ownership opportunities. So the new lots created from Senate Bill 458 are not granted additional development rights and must be maintained to meet the criteria applicable to the parent lot. So then ADUs would not be allowed. But if somebody wanted to allow additions to their house, such as increasing the square footage, they could add those additions to the development if they would still meet criteria applied to the parent lot. And this still includes criteria such as height, lot coverage, and open space requirements. And it does not apply to vertical housing units. Sorry, that was just like a fire hose of information, but just so much confusion everywhere. From planners to people at the state to just everywhere. So just wanted to vomit those facts. And I hope that they helped with some clarification.
And if I could just interject, Christina did a really good job of incorporating the Senate Bill 458 requirements into a new section of our code that's under part of the consideration for this code package. It's section 5.12.200, expedited and middle housing land divisions. So all of what's required under the new Senate Bill 458 rules and laws are part of this package that you're deliberating on.
Great. Thank you, Mark. So with hearing Commissioner Gill's points and my points, I think we have a majority for option 1 on minimum lot size. Okay, I'm seeing some head nods. I do want to note it is 9 o'clock. We still have to elect a chair and have business from the Planning Commission and business from staff. So just want to check in, is this a good place to stop? And then if it is, let's discuss whether it's appropriate to continue this discussion on a special session on the week of the 21st. I think we need clarification on whether that would be held on the 22nd or the 23rd, or I think it was March 1st.
And I don't know if you're looking for staff's response to that, but I think it is a good time to potentially pause. If I could recap, I think what I've heard is kind of from a kind of straw poll standpoint on lot size. Generally, the majority is looking at option 1 from the parking standpoint. A general kind of direction sounds like also option 1 under parking. And then we could discuss the other 3 topics at a continued deliberation session. I'm going to maybe look to Sandy. I don't know if the 22nd or 23rd, I think if you're setting a special meeting, I don't know that it's prohibitive to not have it on the same night as a council meeting because of the holiday on the Monday of the 21st. It sounded like if 23rd was preferable because of a conflict you had, Chair McKinley. There's probably flexibility to consider the 23rd. Otherwise, it sounds like probably March 1st. I think if we could, I know it's hard to speculate, but if we thought we could wrap up in one more meeting, I think March 1st would be fine. If it goes beyond that, I'm looking at my timeline again. I think at the very most, what we would be looking to do is push out, have a meeting on March 1st, and then at the very latest wrap up on March 15th. And Brenda, I think you said March 15th. It does have another Main Street facility plan, continued public hearing on there, but we could potentially add another item to that agenda. So anyway, just thinking ahead.
Yeah, we have it 2 hours are scheduled. Yeah, 2 30-minute items for the Committee for Citizen Involvement, and then another hour for continued public hearing on the Main Street if they need it.
So I'll just raise a question here, which hasn't been talked about yet tonight. I understand Commissioner Cuevila has some issues he would like for consideration by the commission, which have not been brought up as of yet. I think he could include that in your packet so that you would be able to look at those, or we could include those in your packet so you would have a chance to review those before your next meeting. We do have an hour scheduled for your continued deliberation on the 15th. But that would make that long meeting in addition to your 2 other public hearings. So that's why we were thinking maybe it would be nice to separate it out to have a meeting on the week of the 21st, but that's completely up to you. But I just wanted you to know that that Commissioner Cuevila has some other concerns, and maybe other commissioners do too, of other things you want to have addressed in the code amendments before making your final recommendation to council.
Thank you, Sandy. Is there any preference on the date? Does anybody have a strong preference against Wednesday, the 23rd? Okay, I'm seeing some shakes. So general thumbs up for continued discussion on the 23rd. Okay, great. And then if you have specific concerns you'd like to see included in the packet, please get those to staff. And those will be included for us to discuss.
So one follow-up question. I know that you've got the 2 hearing items on the 15th. We have currently scheduled the community engagement plan for the comprehensive plan map on March 1st. I would tend to leave it there because that's the only item scheduled for that meeting. And I don't know that we need to get it on the 15th, but I'm just putting that out there that because we're not going to have that deliberation on the 15th, we would start unless you decide you wanted to do that community engagement plan, we'd start your regular meeting at 7 for those 2 public hearings.
Great, thank you, Sandy. Okay, so staff, do you have all the direction you need from us on this topic? Okay.
Yep,
great.
Thank you very much.
So our next item on our agenda is report on city council meetings. We can also postpone that if we want. Commissioner Bergen.
I'm happy to postpone. I've just have a report from the beginning of January, whatever the commission would prefer. My notes aren't going anywhere.
I would recommend that we go ahead and have our reports brief, however brief they are. We haven't had reports in a while, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Cuevila. Go ahead, Commissioner Bergen.
Okay, great. Thank you. As I mentioned, this was from the first meeting for City Council. So I believe that was January 4th. I, of course, didn't write the date down. Apologize for that. It consisted of the Police Advisory Committee interviews. There were 3 open positions, 8 applicants, and they did appoint 3 of the position, all 3 positions. all of the applicants were extremely well qualified, very diverse backgrounds, and it's really encouraging to see so many people looking to step up and be a part of our community. And so I was really excited about that. They did hold a CETA interview for the one seat. There was one person that couldn't attend the interviews. I believe it was the session prior. And so they welcomed them over for that interview. And then they reviewed the 2020 census numbers and talked about the wards and possibly needing to redraw them. Just as throwing information out there, they didn't make any decisions or recommendations on that. There was a discussion on if we were to redraw them. My notes are limited, that it would be approximately $4,000 cost to the city if we were to redraw the districts to better facilitate or better represent numbers, community members in the specific areas, because some areas have grown quicker than anticipated and others haven't grown as quickly as anticipated, to even them out. And then I also included in the notes that in the next 10 years, we'll have to revisit as more homes are added, for example, Marcola Meadows. And they, at that time, decided not to adjust lines and that we will reassess during the next census. And those are my notes. So thank you so much for hearing those.
Thank you for sharing them. Commissioner Cuevila.
I attended the January 10th meeting. The discussion was regarding eliminating fines for late items from the library, and there was general consensus that that was a good idea and that we can do without I think it was expressed that the input from that was only like $4,000, and it created hassles between staff and clients, et cetera. So there was general consensus that we're going to be a city that the library doesn't charge fines for late books. And then they discussed the council and mayoral vacancies, being that we had our mayor resign and our Ward 1 councilor become mayor, and then so we had two vacancies at the same time, and both were done by appointment. The question was, should those have been done by election? And the consensus of the city council was they were happy with being able to appoint mayors and councilors, and that's the way they're going to continue. If there's vacancies, they're going to appoint from the city council, the mayor, and any vacant council positions. So that was that 110.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Cuevila. I don't know that it's a meeting, but they were all there. I watched the State of the City address. It's one of my favorite times of the year. It's really hopeful in tone, even with the difficult year that we've all been through. So I just encourage everyone to watch it. There's a lot of really exceptional work coming out of the Planning and Public Works Department, as well as other departments. And I think it's just a good recap of a lot of the work that happened and a summary, a sneak peek of what's to come. Is there any further report on city council meetings? Okay, so we will move on to business from the Planning Commission. This is an exciting one because we have our 2022 Planning Commission assignments. So I will hand it to Brenda for the Planning Commission assignment explanation.
So each year at the beginning of the year, we bring up the topics of new chair, vice chair, and new committee members. And we've had to postpone it because of the meetings that you've had have been joint meetings. So this is the first opportunity that we had to bring this to you. So I'm going to open it up to you guys for nominations, or if you so want to fill a position, you can nominate yourself.
Thank you, Brenda. Commissioner Bergen.
I would like to throw Commissioner Gill's hat in the ring for vice chair again or chair. Either way, I know you served a vice chair position and you did great at that point. I think that we would be well served with you in the helm.
Thank you, Commissioner Bergen. I wanted to just quickly say a word of encouragement for anyone interested in chair or people who are not interested in chair. I was not interested in chair. If I wear my Apple Watch during meetings, I get heart rate alerts because I do not like public speaking. And it was a really wonderful experience to be able to work with staff in a different way. I think there's increased flexibility now with the virtual and maybe one day hybrid meetings for those pre-meetings the day before. So really the time commitment was 10 minutes to review the script and agenda, and half an hour to maybe sometimes we went to like 45 minutes with the pre-meeting if it was especially interesting. But staff is just wonderful to work with. And it's been a pleasure doing it. So thank you all for your trust in me, but I also encourage you, if it's something that you haven't thought about, to think about it perhaps, because it was a fun time. Commissioner Cuevila.
I'd like to recommend Commissioner Landon as our chair for 2022.
Should we start with position specific maybe? And then so we have, I guess tonight we have, I apologize that I don't have it in front of me. We have chair, vice chair, we have development code update project liaisons, the CDAC liaison and the BPAC liaison. And CDAC is the Community Development Advisory Committee and BPAC is the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So do we want to start with chair? We have one nomination. Do you accept that nomination, Commissioner Landon?
I do.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other nominations? Okay, so let's vote by a show of hands. All those in favor of Commissioner Landon becoming our new chair? All right, that passes unanimous. Congrats, Chair Landon.
And now vice chair, we had one nomination for Commissioner Gill. Do you accept that?
Sorry for my hesitation. I'm just trying to determine with my work situation if it would be appropriate for me to do that. I actually think it would be best for me not to, also because my work with the state has had some interaction with the city of Springfield, and I just think serving on the planning commission is okay, but and the chair or vice chair role feels a little too close to an ethical line for me. So I just want to be really cautious with that kind of stuff. So I appreciate the nomination, but I feel like it's kind of appropriate for me to decline that nomination.
I don't know if I'm still calling on people or not, but I would like to nominate Commissioner Salazar for vice chair.
Second.
Commissioner Salazar, do you accept?
Well, very humbled and honored for the nominations and second. I would like to ask about the timing commitment of being the vice chair. I am excited to announce that I'm expecting a child in March, so not sure how much time or energy I'll have, especially in those first couple months, or how much sleep I can, how well slept I'll be in meetings. So yeah, just wanted to ask what the position entails, especially Commissioner Landon having recently been in it.
if you want the bad news, the kids they take up more time as they get older. But there's a meeting that we have about, what is that, Brenda, a couple hours before, ahead of time, where we go over the agenda. So everything is very, very well mapped out. Staff does a wonderful job of preparing a script. If you can read English, you can do what needs to be done. It's not difficult.
Does the day before the hearing, we usually meet for 30 minutes to go over the agenda, the script, answer any questions you guys might have, and then the meeting itself. And then if there's anything special, that it's typically just the pre-meeting and the meeting that you attend now.
All right, that doesn't sound like too big of a lift. I might be kicking myself later, but yeah, I'm happy to accept.
Okay.
Can I offer a couple words of encouragement to the soon to be expectant father? Since coming on to the Planning Commission, I have had 2 children since being a commissioner, and it is, as you've probably seen, the attention going sideways, but I have full faith that you can do it. Do both, be an excellent father and be an excellent vice chair. You have proven to study the packets really well, and we appreciate that and everything that you bring. So you may not get a lot of sleep, but just know that it can be done. And especially with this virtual world, it does make it a little bit easier than us having to travel down to City Hall, although sometimes I wish that we could do that so we can get away from the children. Not in a bad way, but just so there's not as many interruptions. So whatever you need, we are here for your support.
Thank you, Commissioner Bergen. Appreciate that.
All those in favor of Commissioner Salazar becoming our vice chair? Okay, that carries. Congratulations, Vice Chair Salazar. Our next one, and Commissioner or Chair Landon, please cut me off if you'd like to carry it through. Our next one is CDAC, and that's currently held by Commissioner Cuevla. I think Commissioner Cuevla, you've done it for a few years. So if you have interest in continuing or
yes, I definitely do have an interest in continuing in that. It's really interesting work. Taking federal money and distributing it to needy causes, including improvements to neighborhoods, services to rebuild housing, etc. It's not a huge time commitment, only like 4 or 5 meetings a year. And I think it's really interesting. I'd love to do it again for another year.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Cuevla to continue on as the liaison to CDAC.
Second.
Any other nominations? All those in favor? All right, congratulations, Commissioner Cuevla. The next one is the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, which Chair Landon has been the liaison to for, I think since I was an intern at the city, so it's been a few years. Commissioner Landon or Chair Landon, do you have interest in continuing on, or would you like to talk about the commitments in case anybody else is interested?
I think that one's okay. If you just want to leave that with me, it doesn't take an awful lot of time. They actually do, usually a bike tour to kind of talk about some of the projects once a year. Talk about some of the safety measures that are doing, like the crosswalks and things like that. But yeah, that one does not burn up a lot of time. So I'd be pleased to continue or turn that one over if somebody else would like to.
And I believe those meetings are every other month. Is that correct?
The second Tuesday, I think, as I recall.
Second Tuesday. Great. Any nominations? All right. I nominate Chair Landon to continue on as the liaison to the BPAC.
Second.
All right. All those in favor? Okay, great. That passes. Congratulations, Chair Landon. You have 2 roles again. The next committee assignment is the Springfield Development Code Governance Committee. This has been held by myself and Commissioner Bergen for a couple years. The meetings were a little more frequent. They were anticipated at 4 a year, and we had a little bit more because of House Bill 2001, because we were working on the housing section. The next section to come up is like the everything else part of the code, and work on that. Let me just double check my notes. Would be taken over, our work on the development code is going to be taken over by Mark Rust backfill, because he was promoted, which is great, but the city's hiring a new senior planner to continue the project. So that planner would need to become acclimated, and I don't know why I'm unable to find my notes, but I think I heard it could be several months before activity picks up again. So we can decide tonight if you're interested in that, like, you know, the beyond part, the Bed Bath and Beyond part of our code, just more regularly advising staff. There's 2 city councilors on it as well. I don't know if I already said that, it's getting late, but I would be amenable to someone else stepping into at least my position. It's been a great learning experience, and I already talk about code a lot through my day job, so. Max 4 times, it's an annual commitment, and you won't start till at least halfway through the year, so 2 times.
I could step in and do that one.
Great. Self-nomination, I second. Commissioner Bergen, are you interested in continuing?
It's my passion spot. But that being said, if someone else wanted to explore that, I would be open to stepping aside. I have really enjoyed it. I don't feel like we met as much in 21, but I would love to continue serving if the commission so desired.
Great. I second your self-domination as well. So,
I also think that continuity is kind of a good idea. And you've done a great job so far.
all those in favor of Commissioner Bergen and Commissioner Gill serving as the governance committee to the Development Code Update Project? Great, that carries. Congratulations, everyone.
So I have one more. We have council liaison.
Thank you.
Curry's. So
I will say that Councilor Pitts does not require a lot of interaction. So I periodically email and update, but it doesn't take much work. I'm happy to continue or let somebody else do that.
A quick question. In my volunteer world, we often nominate people that are not there. And I'm wondering if this is a great opportunity for Commissioner Buck to get really, for lack of a better word, elbows deep in what's happening with commission and with us and how that relates to us. But if you're saying that Councilor Pitts isn't as, doesn't involve as much communication, then I will say that I think any of you would be great representatives. I'm not volunteering myself for that. That might be a great opportunity for a newer commission.
Mm-hmm. Is that
Brenda,
one
would
maybe
we be able to postpone
I second
that one?
I second Commissioner Buck.
Could we like postpone his nominations just to see if he can accept? Okay, great. So we can continue that one. But for now, he's nominated. We'll volunteer him. Great.
So I think that ends that one. I do have something that came up today. Well, yesterday, they're moving all of your emails and your iPads to a different, I believe the cloud, and that's going to happen. They wanted it to do it today, and I said no. So they're doing it tomorrow. So I'll be calling each of you with your new passwords and instructions on how to do, you know, you're going to have a new icon. It's going to be really easy, they say. So I'll get in contact with each of you with your new passwords, and then you can go in and change those passwords to what you want it to be. And anyway, yes, Commissioner Coivula.
I'm one of the people who keeps everything. So will all my emails be migrated
Yes.
to the new system? Thank you.
I was told yes, and that's one of the reasons I said not to do anything till tomorrow, because I didn't want you to lose anything prior to your meeting tonight. So
Thanks.
just in the off chance.
Brenda, just a quick question. Is tonight your last meeting with us?
It is.
Okay.
It
I
is.
just want to say thank you so much. Just can everyone join me in a round of applause for how amazing Brenda's been for us? And
Guys are-
I'm so sorry your last one went to 9:30.
It's okay. That's the job. So anyway,
Thank you very much.
you're very welcome. And I think Sandy has her hand up. Nope.
I was applauding.
Oh. It's been a pleasure. You guys are easy, and I call some of you my friends. Oh, well, all of you my friends. I've known some of you quite a long time. So anyway, I'll miss you.
Being the only one on the committee who's retired now, I hope you enjoy it half as much as I do.
Oh, I'm very excited. Very excited. So, thank you. So that's
Commissioner
it.
Bergen, I see your hands up. Did you want to say something?
Yes, well, I do want to thank you, Brenda, for all of your service to the city. It is definitely amazing, and we are where we're at because of you. So thank you so much for your commitment. We definitely appreciate you, and those are some pretty big shoes that we'll have to fill. So thank you so much.
I appreciate that. You've got some good people coming up.
And
to help
please
you
thank
guys.
your husband for all the late nights that he has offered you up. to
Well, I
us.
think he's already scrolled off to bed, so.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Commissioner McGinley, if we are still business from the Planning Commission, I had something I wanted to share. As I've shared with you guys periodically, the Oregon Realtors puts on really incredible programs. I mentioned a while ago, the Oregon Housing Summit was going to happen. It did happen, but there's another great opportunity that is the Oregon Realtors are putting on February 10th. So you don't have a lot of time to get registered, but it is our first annual Fair Housing Summit. They will be taking a deep dive into the history of fair housing, which, because we deal a lot with housing, I think it's really important, and would be great for any of you to check out the history of fair housing, how fair housing impacts our communities, how we can support fair housing within our community. And then we will hear from Richard Rothstein, who is the author of Color of the Law, Fair Housing Council of Oregon. Color of the Law, and then Fair Housing Council of Oregon, the National Realtors and Oregonians are working to end homeownership inequity. So if anybody is interested in that, I believe it's $25 to attend. It is 9 to noon, so a half day. And I would be happy to share the link with anybody who is interested. I think this is going to be a great opportunity for us to move the ball forward and really learn about the history and why it's important to know where we came from, to know where we're going.
Thank you, Commissioner Bergen. Can you email that to staff to send out to us? And then just a reminder that there is a budget for planning commissioner training. So I might not if I'm correct, please, Sandy. So if you're interested, you can contact staff and they can cover it. I don't want to offer up city money if it's wrong. Great. Is there any other business from the Planning Commission? Okay, let's go on to business from Development and Public Works.
I have nothing further. And we'll see you then on February 15th at 7 p.m.
Great, thank you. I close this regular meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for your good chair work.
I didn't hear what you said.
I'll see you tomorrow, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You know, I fell asleep before the meeting tonight because I knocked off at 4
Hold
o'clock.
on. Hold on.